catching a reflection in the mirror of something standing in the corner of my room, watching me, observing me. Is it my imagination or insanity? A strange hum, a flash of light. I'm overcome, nothing but fright. Otherworldly beings taking me in the night. I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. What do I do? What do I do? Where are they taking me? Where are they taking me? I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. I don't feel real. I wake up in my bed. Was it just in my head? Looking at my hand, there's something there. Inside of me, I'm feeling oh so scared. Confusion and nasty fear. It wasn't just a nightmare. So loud, so bright, hypnotizing me, figures lost in time. I'm tortured, surrounding me tonight. I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. What do I do? What do I do? Where are they taking me? Where are they taking me? I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. I don't feel real. I wake up in my bed. Was it just in my head? Where are they taking me? Others swelling in me. Where are they taking me? Anxiety rising. Was it just in my head? Paralyzing panic. Was it just in my head? I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. What do I do? What do I do? Where are they taking me? Where are they taking me? I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. I don't feel real. I wake up in my bed. Was it just in my head?
All right, folks. Welcome to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and this is PRT. Man. We got 73 people in here, but we'll get more. They'll come. Somebody was teasing me the other day. He's a friend. He's not a bad person. He was just telling me that my show is gonna go into decline if I don't start doing certain things. And I told him, I said, well, that's never gonna happen. So nothing personal, nothing against his beliefs or whatever, but he wants me to get baptized. I've already been baptized, but he wants me to get rebaptized. And he wants me to become Catholic. Because he says I told him, I said, he goes, were you Catholic at one time? I said, yes, I was, because my first baptism was against my will as a baby.
Oh, yeah.
And I say against my will. I didn't have a choice. I mean, you're a baby. I mean, and then they throw water on you.
I mean, technically, you were absent of a will.
I mean, what am I supposed to do? I mean, yeah, you were absent of the will to say, no, thanks. I'd rather not be baptized by the priest. And the priest baptized me. And then when I was 5 and a half, I guess, I remember it was, I was all excited. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be 6 next year. And then I just remember that. I remember going and right, I guess it wouldn't be 5 and a half. I was almost 6. And so My mom and dad told me when you're 6 years old, we'll let you make the choice.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to do it when you're in kindergarten. That's what they told me. So I was all excited to be baptized. I was baptized as a Baptist, and I loved the Baptist church when I was a child. And then I got baptized as a non-denominational when I was 11. So I've been baptized 3 times. So this guy tells me, he says, you need to be baptized. And I said, I've been baptized 3 times. And he says, well, doing it again isn't going to hurt. And I said, what do you have in mind? So he wanted to have me go to the Catholic Church and do a baptism. And I'm like, and he says I should video that. I said, I don't have a whole lot in common with that. So I'm not really going to do that. But I said, I respect your view, but I will respectfully decline. And he goes, it's your soul, I said, it is, but I don't think we have a soul in the way that people think we do. I think we are the soul.
Yeah.
What's talking and everything is talking. And like Ron Moorhead was saying yesterday, like this isn't who we are. We're a spiritual being.
I actually had a question that you and Casey might have a little fun with tonight, because I was thinking the terms spirit and soul, are they interchangeable or are they 2 different things? And if they're 2 different things, then what's the difference?
That's one of those things where it's kind of like, okay, for me, and we can ask Casey when he comes on, he's backstage. For me, I would say this: a spirit, a soul, is your spirit. So it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there are spirits that are not human. So your soul is not necessarily the same thing as this. You know that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's interchangeable, and I think it just depends on whose definition you're dealing with. And I'm sorry we got in late, folks, but I had to go to the gym because I had some things happen today that if I didn't go to the gym, I was just going to be. I'm just tired of getting messed with, folks. I'm going to be real honest. I'm really tired of it. They say when you're going through hell, you just keep going. And that's what I've been doing. You just get tired.
Yeah.
And I worked out really hard, and then I was just kind of dragging ass today at the gym. But luckily, I ran into somebody who kind of knew me, and I kind of knew him. The reason we knew each other was because he knew everybody I've ever trained with in the fight game. And like he knew everybody. So shout out to Josh Scales and Chris Tremble and Deuce. Chief, he knew everybody. Rodney Solis, just about every single person I've ever met in the fight game, ever. Brian Vera, pro boxer, friend of mine. Like he knew. I don't want to leave anybody's name out because there's too many people to list.
Yeah, Deuce.
And then I found out that a couple of my friends have passed away. I didn't know last year, or did it happen last year toward the end of the year? Now I don't. And I don't know this guy that well, and there's nothing against him, but I'm not going to announce that this person has passed away until I check into it. And we went straight, hit the shower. Here we are. So I have not had time to find out if that is true or not. But if it is, it's a sad thing. I didn't realize he had passed away. He was a very good wrestler. But it happens. A lot of these guys, they put their bodies through the ringer. And one of the reasons why I quit doing it is because I want to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And not taking anything away. Some of these guys have all their faculties. They can talk clearly, whatever. But there are times when I kind of get stuck on something and I think, I wish I would have got hit in the head so many times. But I got hit in the head, in my opinion, and this is just my humble opinion, I got hit in the head, I think, a lot less than some of my peers. Because believe it or not, I'm a big guy, and you guys can attest to this. But I mean, it's not really fair. Y'all are my nephews, but people think you'll lie for me, but you're not going to lie for me.
You don't move like a big guy.
I don't move like I'm like
You're supposed to move
quick.
slow and lumbering.
Yeah, and I don't move like that. So I have a pretty good bob and weave, and I'm a pretty hard target for a big guy.
That's what made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Leatherface so terrifying, because he was huge, but like in the movie, he just like
he moves
sprints
really
and moves quick. Like holy crap!
My parents knew that guy.
Yeah,
he was a UT student.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mother said that how big he was, and how he could move. And that they were actually in one of the offices. Because my mom and dad got a job through my grandmother, who had a little cleaning service, and they actually had the UT contract. You know how lucrative that would be nowadays?
Yeah.
But she had the contract to clean UT, and so she had 9 or 10 people working for her. So my mom and dad were, and my dad was probably always stoned back then. So I doubt he was a very good worker. That's just my opinion. I'm joking. He's always had a good work ethic. But back in those days, my grandpa used to call him Meathead because of the what is it called? All in the Family. Meathead, because he was a liberal. He was on the left, whatever.
Bunker.
Yeah. So my dad was Meathead because he was a Democrat. My grandfather was a Democrat back then, but he was a John F. Kennedy Democrat. It was a different type of Democrat, and so he always called my dad Meathead. Though he was just like, you meathead. And so he would tell everybody that my dad was not a good worker and that he smoked pot all the time. And my grandpa was very ignorant because you know how pot smells bad? My grandpa told me that they were mixing it with goat shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've told you that before. Yeah.
I wouldn't blame him for deducing that based on the nasty way it smells.
And it smells bad.
And maybe he was right. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Tony, do you smoke goat poop? I don't know. Do you?
Yes, he does.
But
only the finest.
Let him answer for himself.
I smoke goat poop. Anthony drinks cat poop.
He drinks it?
He loves coffee. I think his favorite coffee is that cat poop coffee.
I was talking about Civet coffee.
Oh, Civet. Okay.
I've never had that, and I don't think I'm ever going to.
That's not true. I bought some for y'all at Christmas, and like maybe. It was the year before Nelly came because
I never drank that.
No, we did.
Well, then I forgot.
He's lying. He said he liked it.
Drink it every day.
Well, then
you said you liked it.
I didn't. I don't remember.
Said the turd taste was his favorite.
That turdy aftertaste.
Yeah,
was the best.
Nutmeg.
Oh God. But yeah. So, anyways, the Leatherface point was that the guy that played that dude. He was a big guy, and he was. My parents knew him, and my mother said that they had the chainsaw. They didn't have the blade on it, but they were messing with it, and he was swinging it around, literally at the UT office where they had, because it was a UT student project. Did you guys know that? That it was UT students that made that.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And then what happened was there was this guy whose dad was in World War II. And so all the UT students attacked him because his dad was in World War II. Did you know that?
Well, of course. I mean, everyone knows that UT students hate anyone who fought the Nazis.
Yeah,
because the liberal UT students should love Nazis and they love fascism.
Diametrically opposed to it.
Yeah, and they love all forms of fascism and Nazism over at the UT campus. Everyone knows that.
Thank you, Paula King.
They're definitely not liberal at UT at all. Duh.
Yeah, they're not at all. Yeah. So I have never in my life heard of anybody being attacked for being in World War II or for their parents being in World War II. But apparently, if you are crazy enough and you make up enough BS, I'm just saying, maybe this person fell off of a roof or something. I don't know. But that should have been the red flag for me when I saw that. I was like, this person's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So, folks, get your name in green. We did the mail-offs today. How many people did we mail off for today?
I guess I think it was like 14, 15.
14 or 15. I was going to say 14. because I counted 14. So maybe it's a
I
little
think
more.
one person's from the UK, so I hold them off because I wanted to ask you what we want to do with that first.
Paul Sinclair book is about best we can do right now
Yeah.
because it is so ridiculous. But
Yeah.
you did mail off to Canada today, right?
Yeah,
We had to.
well, I mean, we had to, but it was for Dick Richards, and I was like, well, yeah, he definitely gets
Yeah.
it.
Did you hook him up? Give him a lot of stuff?
Yeah. You got a signed sticker from me though, so not important.
Why the hell would you sign a sticker and give it to somebody?
I signed it on the back of the
You
sticker,
ruined the
so
sticker.
it was useless.
It
too.
gets it.
you
He's
did.
like, "What is this? It's ruined now."
I signed it on the sticky part of the
It'd
sticker.
be ruined if
too.
I signed it. Like somebody said, like, "What is this crap? Is this Josh Turner, the country singer?" No, it's a guy with a podcast, but he's got a lot of people. If you put all 15 platforms together, and they're like, "I don't want this. Get it out of here." But thank you for the donations, folks. Get your name in green because we're gonna have a giveaway tonight. How's everybody doing tonight? I see Gwen. See Sailor. How you doing, Amy? Sugar Britches. What's up, Sugar Britches? The real OG right there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get started. We got 220 people. I'm going to bring our guest on. Kevin, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, hey, man. How are you guys?
I'm decent. How are you?
Well, I guess if you give the theory of relativity creeps, I'm relatively okay. I want to, first of all, just salute you guys for having such an outstanding show. I've been watching for at least a couple of years now. And obviously, Josh, you're the tip of the spear. But everybody there, Anthony, Mushu, Nelly, so much goes into a given production, as you guys know, that, it's beyond exaggeration. And it's just such an amazing job. The graphics, the music, everything the way it's put together. So I just wanted to say that, right up front, because it really merits acknowledgement, and thank you.
I appreciate that. Like,
Thank you for that, Kevin.
Kevin is made the rounds a little bit lately. He was on Monica's show and then on Jason Bland's show. And I was like, and what sucked for me was I was only able to see a little bit of it on each one because we got a late start on Sunday. So apologies to Jason and you because I wasn't able to get over there. And I wanted to interview you. So I reached out and told Kevin, hey, just come on my show and let's talk because I have not been able to pin you down and what everybody else has gotten to talk to you. And there was a lot of interesting things. Thank you for that. It says down payment for the first edition autograph vampire book. I was actually working on the vampire book today. So that was good. Okay, I'm going to be real honest though, folks. And this has nothing to do with Kevin or anybody else, but so I've gotten my second threat from quote unquote the vampire community that I need to stop.
Wow.
But they're not giving me any kind of stop how. They're not telling me how to stop. So I'm just going to keep going because they're not being specific.
Oh, Lord.
So vampire community, tell me how you want me to stop exactly.
A little bit too vague.
Stop making cakes. Do I need to stop riding a bike? What am I needing to stop? I don't know.
Wow.
Stop walking around with steaks. I don't know.
Don't go to door selling steak.
Stop eating garlic.
You're eating way too much garlic, and you're selling steaks door to door. And these aren't the edible kind. I don't know. It was a very vague email. It's from Two Fangs, and this guy says you need to stop it, and I'm like, okay. Stop what? I have no idea what he's talking about, or he or she.
Did you accidentally make an accident inside, like a dog? Stop it.
Well, so here's what we did last night, Kevin. We were driving around and we were taking some footage.
I saw some of that. Yeah.
And it was in an area where we have been before, where I'm positive 100% that it's Bigfoot habitation or possibly Dogman or both, because both have been seen.
I saw the branches that you saw that broke off.
Yeah. And so I had somebody that was kind of trolling me about it, and I wanted to address that really quickly. They're like, oh, they're just old, broken, dried trees. No, they weren't. There might have been one or two, but most of those were like that one that was like a big sapling. Mm-hmm. That was not a dead piece of wood, and whatever broke that, I don't have the physical strength to do that or to yank that thing up out of the ground and toss it down that trail. I don't know. I tried to lift that up off camera because I didn't want to do it on camera and look. I tried, Kevin, and it was very heavy. I could not lift that. It was So somebody lifted it and tossed it a good 20 feet from where it originally was. And you could see where they tore it up out of the ground. And nobody hit that with their car, because there's like one here, another one here, and then that empty spot, and then another one here. And it was like it had been taken, pulled out, and thrown. And then there were some that were broken. Did you see those broken ones?
I did.
I mean, you know,
That's a spooky road that you're on too. Some of the parts of that road are pretty sketchy.
and if you noticed, you know, you saw the swampiness of it. There's
Yeah,
like
and I made a comment about that because you know who likes to hang out in the swamps.
absolutely. Yeah, and so you know, we've had some accounts come from that area,
I bet.
and you know, I don't know what to think. I've heard about that cemetery being haunted. When I was 16 years old, we drove out there and we jumped the fence to that cemetery. Or I was 17, I think, and I jumped the fence and we went into that cemetery and we played around. And I kid you not, we heard what sounded like a person pretending to be an owl. It was not an owl, and you could hear them. And then I heard what sounded like two people, like maybe having a conversation, but you couldn't make out what they were saying, and their voices were really deep. And it was coming from like this clump of trees, and it was spooky as hell. And we got the hell out of there. And I'm embarrassed to say this, but like there was a girl that I was actually trying to impress, and we started to drive off without her. And she's like, I look back and I'm like, oh shoot, she's in the car.
Dang.
And I had this old Buick Skyhawk car, you know. But she like runs up and smacks me in the back of the head and then jumps in the back of the car. And I was like, Jason told me to go.
Well, you got her attention.
I was just following orders, man.
I blame my friend. I'm like, he told me to go. He was, you know, and Jason's like, no, I didn't. You be lying. And I was like, oh, whatever. But so Kevin, I've heard part of what you were talking about. Now, this is what I heard. Okay, I heard you talk about aliens a little bit. I heard you talk about vampires a little bit, and just a plethora.
Well, you know, your show is amazing for the wide palette which you guys are drawing from existentially and paranormally speaking, if that's even a word.
Well, it is now.
My experience is a much more most of what I have to share that I think that's of merit is the prescient dreams and experiences that I've had with the medium, the woman I was in love with and living with at one time. But you know, I was watching your show a while back when Chris Garitano was on there, and I mentioned this in at least one of the other shows, and he said something that would just hit the tuning fork so profoundly. He said, it wasn't like this a while ago. And I'm paraphrasing it. Maybe he said a few years ago, but clearly, you know, I mean, I lived in Austin in the 90s, lived there a couple of occasions, Travis Lake at one point. And to say it was a different world is a little bit too vague and an understatement of biblical proportions. It literally feels like someone has opened up Pandora's box, you know, and between ritual magic being abused and whether it's by would-be adepts or government agencies, the super soldier genetic. I mean, this to say nothing of the extraterrestrial races that are basically terrified of what we're going to do to the planet or want to take it over. I mean, we are living in such incredible times that you can't possibly exaggerate it, you know, profoundly. And I'm definitely giving hyperbole, if nothing else. But I'm not sure where you'd like me to start, but you know, you mentioned vampires. When I had prescient dreams of that nature, you know, which started occurring to me 50 years ago. That's a long time. I'll be 71 in October, and I've seen a lot, experienced a lot, you know, watched a lot of things happen in our world, and sharing stuff of that existential nature and those it was a much different world, and sharing things of the nature which I've been sharing on these shows recently was really kind of going out on a limb, metaphysically speaking. I had to be very careful who I spoke with, and even given them the most receptive audience, when I had the dreams of the vampires, which was relatively recently, that shook me to my core. It wasn't until I started watching your show that I really started to believe, by virtue of the accounts that you've shared with everyone, what's going on. Because like you, I was something of an academic nerd. I was too poor to go to school. I was working 40 hours a week at 14 to help my mom out. It was just the two of us. But I was a real nerd, man. I was always reading, and I was drawing like an invisible magnet to everything mystical, starting with archaeology and mythology, and the natural segue to from that to Creepy Magazine. I mean, I just really launched myself fully into that world, and have continued to to turn those pages ever since in more ways than one. It's incredible. It seems, at the risk of not being profound, that most of the things that you've been sharing, experiencing yourselves, and hearing about, it would appear that the things we read about in mythology are exaggerated truths. There's no science fiction is being proven every day to be more science fact than anything else. And a hardly profound thought, but it's the pervasive and consistent nature of these things running at breakneck pace on parallel paths that are just so astonishing to me. I chose to get into music. I really loved athletics, football, boxing, and later kung fu. Chess was a big love of mine, in addition to the things I just mentioned. But I was always reading, and almost always this subject matter. I got into music because it really kind of insulated me from so much of the harshness and chaos and cruelty of the world. And it gave me a sense of purpose, which everybody needs. I mean, it's the difference between living and existing, isn't it? Doesn't have to be anything profound, but you have to have something that catches you up so you realize all of a sudden, with a mixture of surprise and concern, maybe that 3 hours have gone by and you haven't showered, you haven't eaten, but you're really lost in that zone. And in that zone, time seems to stop. And it's a beautiful place. You get there through a lot of different means, right? You experience it through athletics, through more artistic things. But that place,
finding that peaceful plane, one way. Or the other,
yeah, that zone, man.
You can get there through physical exertion.
Absolutely.
Physical exertion. I want to say something really quickly with you.
Sure, go ahead.
What Kevin just said is very important, because if you want to find a place where they can't pick your brain, if you are so inclined to be a conspiracy theorist, if you're that way, when you are in that heightened state of physical exertion, that's the best time to do some thinking, because there is nothing that can tap into your mind at that point, right? So, and I'm telling you this is just a piece of advice for those who are so inclined to believe that they have a way to tap into your and I would say it seeps out through your aura. And especially your third eye, and so it'll literally you'll be opened up at that time, but no one can really get a bead on you because you're exerting so much energy. It's flying everywhere. And if you're one of those people who can see auras, I know some people who can really see auras. Now, I could do it after heavy meditation, but if you go to the gym after heavy meditation, you'll see auras of all different colors from coming off of people. And I'm not even joking.
The ancients knew that we our monkey mind, dragging our consciousness relentlessly from branch to branch, had to be reined in. So if you look at these belief systems, you'll find they're rooted in physical culture first, and that kind of that harmony then brings about, allows the spirit to start to evolve. And I think particularly of the martial disciplines, and I mentioned kung fu because that was what I had most experience in. But yeah, it's so important.
It really is an art too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I just think that, we all know this at some level, but the world seduces, harangues us, grabs our attention and pulls us outward, into and we often forget what we know. And which is why environment, of course, is so powerful. I remember reading a quote by Yogananda. He said, environment is more powerful until you're anchored in the divine. Because they're such impressionable, no matter, it doesn't how intelligent, how gifted you are, we're impressionable, and it's we all know on some level that it's so important the people and things we surround ourselves with, So sorry, go ahead.
So when you were talking on, and I can't remember which show it was, it might have been Monica's show, and I caught part of it when me and Jason went over there and we were checking it out. And I thought, well, here's where the party's at. Kevin's on there, and you got Monica and Joe, and everybody was there. And so I was like, what's going on over here? And so Jason showed up, and so when you were talking about the vampire thing.
Let me just start by saying this. Pardon me. Just to give you a little bit of a background, I started having at a pretty young age with people what I learned later was called prescient dreams, and this is important because it really is the foundation from which everything flows for me and my life journey. And the first one, I was working at the county at a time when it was very racially charged, very polarized. My mother was Irish, and my dad was half native, lived on the res, and half Irish. Just my mother and I, and we lived in Washington, D.C. But we also, we lived in D.C. and we also lived in Maryland at different times. So it was very racially polarized. When I went to work for the county, I'd already been working 40 hours a week for years. But I couldn't believe, the white guys worked in the street division and the brothers worked, in the tree division, and the brothers worked in the street division, and there were no exceptions. Literally like 50 and 50, about roughly, And my experience with most country people at the time was a negative one. I had grown my hair out. I forgot at ROTC. I had really long hair. And if the pickup truck drove by at that time, it was a 50-50 chance you were getting in a real one. And I was playing music already. So most of the guys I was playing blues mostly and jazz. So most of the cats I was running with were brothers. And it was a different climate in those days to do that. You really took your life in your hands in a lot of places.
Yeah, it was not looked on fondly.
No, and most of the brothers were cool. I've been in black clubs by myself so many times and nothing ever happened to me, But rednecks were a whole different thing, and a lot of the country guys were great, but a lot of them were not so great. The reason I bring this up is that I chose immediately to work in the street division, and I was put in a crew with two huge guys in the Deep South. One guy named Ulysses. He was 6'4", 275 pounds, and then Tommy McAllister was 6'2" and almost 300. And then was my boss, Casey Maddox, who was a very dark-skinned guy in his late 50s. He was from Georgia. So this is 1973. So you can imagine what kind of stuff he was going through as a young man living in the Deep South.
Deep South, yeah.
And when I first started working with them, they rode me like he rode me like a pony. But if you show up for work in time and you keep up with the guys, then you get, grudging respect if nothing else. And I got that, and at first it was very difficult to even have a conversation of the most mundane variety with him because he just was so jaundiced. And so he was angry. And I understood enough to know that, although as I said on Monica's show, my world, racially speaking, is so interwoven with African-American life and culture that thread is so woven into my fabric of my life, it was pulled, my entire universe would collapse. The woman to change my diapers when my mother was at work was African-American. The guy that came to my house on weekends when we moved to Maryland, every weekend to help my mother with stuff I wasn't smart or strong enough to do yet, was a dark-skinned, very soft-spoken man who, it was just, it was like that. And so I had no problem with the comfort level. Xenophobia was not something that was vaguely an issue for me because that's why, as we all know, integration is so essential. So fast forward, I'm working with the crew, and KC eventually started to let up, and it got to the point where they started calling us the odd couple because we were always palling around, in between, at lunch, and it became very clear that there was a unique kind of chemistry going on. Now, being a lot older than me, we didn't really hang after work hours, but I was very fond of the guy. I got very fond of him very quickly, and I would eventually say the same was clear. To make a long story not too much longer, time moved along as inexorably as it always does, and I was really deep into the guitar. And I remember one of the things that blew my mind was he knew some of the guys I was studying, people like Leadbelly and Alan Wolf, guys that were to me like Paul Bunyan. Like folk, John Henry, people that were larger than life. So we had a unique chemistry, at the risk of sounding redundant. I left there, I got so into the guitar at that point, I was ready to start getting out there and, making a stab at it for a living. But I stayed in touch with the fellas, and I lived in an African American neighborhood. I mean, I was the only white person in the entire complex, so my buddies felt comfortable visiting me after work. And one night, man, I had a dream, and one of the guys that was part of the crew was a guy named Mickey, tall, strapping, good-looking Creole from New Orleans, and he was kind of an older, an older brother figure, and not having a dad, I was constantly looking for a father figure. And people of color have to mature, as a rule, much faster, than my experience, than my Caucasian counterparts, because they get out of bed and they're playing a rigged game before they even leave the house.
Yeah, especially back then. It was
holding their own 24/7 at a rigged game. So, this guy and I became very good friends. I took him to see Eric Clapton, and I just remember him laughing and saying, "I didn't know you white folks like this kind of stuff." And this is 1973. Actually, it was 74 by this time. So I had a dream one night, not long after I left work, after I had left the employee of that place, that I was back at work, but there was nobody there but my boss. But he's wearing a 3-piece suit, like a brown, pocket watch vest, the whole nine, man, with the bowler hat he always wore. And I remember thinking, what's he doing wearing a suit at work, and where's everybody else? And the minute that thought went through my head, he turned and looked at me. His face was just beaming with light. I woke up immediately, and I had goosebumps everywhere. And I had to get up and walk outside the house. And who was walking down the sidewalk, if you believe in coincidence, which I don't think exists, but my friend Nikki, the Creole from New Orleans.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, in those days, brothers and sisters didn't go very far from where they lived by themselves in certain parts of Maryland and Virginia. Okay. So I was like, my first reaction is like, "Hey, Mickey, what are you doing out here?" And before he could answer, I said, man, I just had the strangest dream about KC. And he was about maybe 15, 20 feet from me at the most. And he's walking steadily down the hill on the sidewalk, and he stopped and he just stared at me. And he said, "What was the dream, man?" And I told him, and he went, "Oh my God." And he sits down, and I said, "What's up, man? What?" And he looked up at me, and I could see he was troubled. He said, "Man, I don't know how to tell you this, man. I know you guys were tight." And I went, "Oh no." And he said, "Yeah." I said, what happened?" He goes, "He went fast. We were just at work, man. He keeled over. The reason I'm over here today is we could view the body. They buried him in that 3-piece brown suit you just described with the pocket watch and the vest." So then I had to sit down.
Well,
yep. So that was the first of many dreams of that nature I've had. I never know when they're going to come. They're usually spaced like a year or so apart, but they're always, ringing that existential bell, man. And so not long after that, we chatted. I was living in Tacoma Park, Maryland at the time, which was actually a pretty cool area, the artistic area, but a lot of Maryland wasn't, especially getting to PG County. Serious rednecks in those days. And Montgomery County and Prince George's cops were the worst. So fast forward, Muddy Waters is appearing at the Cellar Door, which is a famous blues club in Washington, D.C. And it was this celebration of the centennial of the country, 1976. It was the beginning of the year 76. And so there was artists coming there on a weekly basis, almost all of them blues artists. And I went down and I met the man, and that was a galvanizing experience, to say the least. I'll never forget when I walked in the door. I had been waiting outside for him, and he said, "What do you got in the case, young fella?" I said, "A Gibson SG Standard, sir." He said, "All right, take it out. Let me see what you can do with it." I was so nervous. I could hardly keep them shaking. So I wisely pulled the slide out of my pocket. And a lot of people don't know, like a slide's like it's kind of like pedal steel in country. You put something on your finger. It could be brass. It could be copper. It could be a bottle from a wine or whiskey bottle you sand down. But when you use that, it gives it a much different sonic effect, almost more close to a voice perhaps than any other aspect of guitar playing that I'm aware of. And I started because I knew that I wouldn't have to worry about my fingers shaking if I had the slide on there. So I focused on that, and I played something that got his attention. And I just got new strings, and I didn't have any clippers. So he said, "Yeah, you got a nice touch, son, but cut them them strings off. He poked someone's eye out. And I got up and looked at him. He said, I guess you ought to come on in. And the minute I got in there, he said, I don't want you to be shy because I'm here, but who's your favorite blues man? And without missing a beat, I said, well, Howlin' Wolf. And he proceeds to get the story by getting in a knife fight with Howlin' Wolf. So the reason I'm saying this is because to me, Chicago blues was the epicenter musically of everything I wanted to do and be. And I really had that was the bar. That was where all the Woodstock musicians were getting their stuff from, was country and blues cats, Latin music was just, as most people would define it, was just beginning to take effect, as Santana took the world by storm in that regard. But I digress. So I go out to, I wanted to go to Chicago. My mother was absolutely panicked about the idea of my young tender ass being in that city, and was certain it would chew me up and spit me out. And she probably wasn't wrong, but I ended up hitchhiking out to California. And when I got there, I ended up becoming friends with a guy. He was the only African-American business owner in the town of Laguna Beach. He was getting death threats for dating a white girl, which to me was just incredulous. I mean, August of 76. And to me, California, so many of us, it represented so many things, ideally speaking, not prejudice, not in that list. So we bonded, and we basically, I convinced them to stand up to these guys who are most racist or bullies, and some are very dangerous. But to make a long story short, we bonded heavily as a result of that experience. And he introduced me to a woman who was to change my life forever. And her name was Meredith. Unbeknownst to me at the time, she was a professional medium from a long line of mediums that give handed down from mother to daughter, going back generations to France. And her professional name was April. She was part of a group called the Church of Mind Science, headed by a guy named Damien Simpson. And she had left that place because she felt they were using her gift for financial aggrandizement. And she said it's one thing to keep the lights on, but that's not how the gift's supposed to be. So she was working as a hostess at a restaurant when I met her, and when Sam introduced me to her. And we hit it off right away and started dating. And on one of the dates, I shared that dream I just shared with you. And she looked at me for several seconds without saying anything. And what she said was deeply personal. I really can't. It just sounds too self-aggrandizing to repeat. But it struck a note with her, all music upon the side, and we started, living together.
Well, hold on. So, I mean, at the risk of
no, go ahead.
Self-aggrandizing, just tell us what it was.
She said, I knew you were different. She says, you're open to a fault, but there's something very unique about you. My gut was telling me this, and the dream reflects, confirms my intuition. That's the best way I could say it right now. So, we weren't living together very long, like matter of days, and I was so, at the time I was reading so much. I had already met and had experience studying Kung Fu with a real master, and to give you an idea of his level, the first time we competed in the World Kung Fu tournament, he took our school to second place to China out of hundreds of schools from 48 different countries. He was led China, long before, and I didn't know anything about Kung Fu. I'd read a review about a book about Bruce Lee called The Little Dragon, just about 3 or 4 months after Bruce died. But most of us thought Kung Fu was something on a menu. I just wasn't, as hip as I was in some other ways. I was very unsophisticated in others. So the experience with him taught me a lot about some basic things that of, like life force, chi, and the meridians, how the energy flows, why acupuncture works, and just a crash course in metaphysics. And at that time, it was so primitive that it was actually against the law to practice acupuncture in the D.C. metropolitan area, what we call the DMV, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. But I, unsophisticated as I was, and inexperienced as I was in so many ways, I had an unerring instinct in others, and I knew he was the real deal. And as fate or karma would have it, the first month I started studying, the first issue of Inside Kung Fu magazine came out. And that's pretty much like the Guitar Player magazine of Kung Fu. And in fact, years later, I was able to get him an interview with that magazine, and which not only helped him in the school, but he ended up being on the cover years later. And you always want to do something for your teachers, for the people that really influence you and guide you. And he was so many things simultaneously to me. So when I was mentioning some of that to Meredith when we were living together, she said, I want to show you, tonight exactly, she was explaining, her lineage. And I kind of looked at the RSA Victor Dog, I'm sure, and he was talking about some of these things. I mean, mediums she says, I thought you said you read, because I had been reading books like, Golden Order of the Dawn, Mathers and Crowley's work. And I had been reading as a kid. Like I'm sure you were, a lot of you guys were reading stuff like that. And that was little Silver Spring, Maryland library, but they had an amazing amount of stuff considering, how the times and the size of the community in general at that time in the world. So I said, yeah, I'm familiar with these terms, but there's so much I don't know. She says, I know. She says, that's why we met. Tonight I'm going to show you what I am. Now, I only been living with her for a little while. We had only been intimate a couple of times. And but I've moved in, right? I'm win, lose, or draw, I'm down, So that night, she had pictures of the saints everywhere in our little apartment. And it was in North Laguna, Chiquita Street. And in those days, we were over top of this garage. The sliding door looked out into the Pacific Ocean. We had like a 180-degree view for like $250 a month. But all through the dome also with pictures of the saints. She was really into Christ, But unlike most people that I've known who were either born again Christians or just Christians per se, she was really wide open for other avenues of expression, spiritually speaking, and would often quote the Buddha and Vedic texts. She was 20, about to turn 29, and I was 21, So she was my teacher in so many ways. So that night, she turned off all the lights in our little place except for one, and she put a towel over that light so it cast a subdued glow. You could see a little bit, but not much. You could see enough. And she started, and she did this every night. And she would start every night with this prayer invocation. And it always started the same way. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Jesus Christ, Bhagavan Krishna, saints of all religions were gathered here in the hope you will manifest yourself. And doing so, expedite our spiritual revolution. We're seeking you, Lord. And she would really get into it, man. I mean, minutes would go by. And the fervor, you couldn't be bored. I mean, the fervor with which she spoke filled the room with an energy that was palpable, man. And I had experience, with hallucinogens roughly for about a year and a half, both organic, and in those days you could get LSD 25, stuff that was really strong, and if you did blow in those days, it didn't have speed in it. It was a real deal.
Yeah.
You were hungry and there was no frozen. It was not to exhort or condone or promote anything. It was a different world in many ways. Me, I was just a weed guy. Weed made music jump out at me, and it made me, it took me to a spiritual place that felt so sacred. I just never wanted to leave it. That being said, I had quit everything when I got there, and I'd been free of hallucinogens for at least a couple of years, at least, and I'm 21. Yeah, so I would have been at least 4 years or so. And I wasn't having a beer, nothing. I just wanted to, I got there. I was going through a crisis of sorts internally, where your biggest wars are. And I was trying to reboot. So I felt just you start with and I remember calling Master on the phone, and he said, to do just that, see if it was my teacher. So that being said, she starts with this prayer, and it went on for a couple of minutes, and then she just stopped. And when she did, you could hear the silence, man. And I know you guys know what I mean. And I looked around the room, reflexively, and it looked like kind of like when you see heat waves on a summer day. It kind of, that was the first visual
The blur.
phenomenon. Yeah, that was to notice. And as I continued to, and I'm sitting at exactly a 45-degree angle from her. I'm on a chair. She's on her couch facing north. Sliding doors are out facing west. And I'm about 5 feet from her. And I noticed that the room started filling up with colors of light, just sweeping through the place. And I mean, it was just so incredibly beautiful that, words can't come close to doing it justice. And I'm ashamed to say that for a minute, I just started wondering, didn't she turn on some switch or something, man? I mean, this is too much, I was seeing, in a way, more phenomena than I ever did. Well, let me get back to, I'm amazed I can remember things so well. You're talking 50 years ago, okay? But this stuff is seared into my memory banks, and in the best way possible. I mean, so I look over, at her. She's at a 45-degree angle, and you know how what they call like a negative from the photograph when you see like black with like yellow around it. The image. Well, that's what she looked like. I couldn't see any features. It was just like a black shadow with yellow around it, like the way you see like a body on a policeman chalks out on the street, like that. Only, like I said, black with a yellow line around her whole form. And as I'm looking at that, it starts to dissipate. And as it does, her face, it looks like it's vibrating. And it reminded me instantly of the way things looked when I was doing hallucinogens, when matter would start to molecularly rearrange itself right in front of me. Oh, I'm not hiding anything. And I watched as her face literally rearranged itself until she looked completely like another woman.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. And then it held its image for 3 or 4 seconds and then morphed into another woman. Then that held its image for 3 or 4 seconds, morphed into another. This went on for about a good 10, 15 minutes at the most. And then, incredibly, if you can believe it, I fell asleep. And when she woke me up, I was pissed off and surprised and stuff. And she just smiled, a knowing smile, and put her hand on my shoulder and said, "You're being healed." So, like a child, I said, "Can we do this again?" She said, "Yeah, I'll do this as many times as you ask. I feel that is what's supposed to happen." I'm paraphrasing, but not by much. So, I woke up the next day like Lazarus on crack and like, "Hey, she said, just go about your day and, trust that, we'll find our way back to," and night came, the exact same ceremony.
And she was healing you from what, do you think?
Oh, I'm not saying she was healing me.
Well,
Spirit,
I mean, the spirit was
healing. Well, that's a good question, isn't it? I'm only 21. I've been through some pretty heavy things already at that time, but that's a good question. I think she was referring to any psychic or metaphysical damage that had been done through extreme stress, duress. I'd already had one bad cocaine phase, although it was very young, and that could be really screw with your innards, as you know. So I didn't question too much beyond that. I was ready for the next performance, and she didn't disappoint. Next night, same thing. Oh, yeah, lasted longer before I fell out. And I'm telling you, man, that these women that took her visage over were so beautiful. They didn't look human. And I asked her right away, when it was either the first or second day when I woke up, and why is it? And she looked at me and she smiled and said, "Well, what do you think? What is your gut, Kevin? You're very intuitive. What is your gut? What is your intuition telling you?" And I said, "Well, that you're tuning into other people on that same vibratory frequency, but why would they all be women, and why would they all look like that? I mean," and she just smiled and she says, "I don't know. I'm not there when this is happening. I'm, gone, So this went on, night after night for weeks, months. We were there in Laguna for a good 3 months before we moved up to Long Beach when her mother became ill. But many things happened before that, not the least of which was we came back from a restaurant called the Captain's Anchorage at Dana Point, And there was so much ectoplasm in the freaking room that we thought the place was on fire. I ran to call the fire department. Well, she looked to see what was left on in the kitchen, because it looked like smoke, and I had never seen ectoplasm. I'd read about it, in books of metaphysics and magic stuff, but I didn't know what. So I'm giving the directions to the fire department, and she just rips the phone out of my hand, and she starts to basically convince the fire department not to come. This is not a prank. We're really sorry. We made an awful mistake, but there's no fire here. And the fire department was just like a few blocks away. Laguna is a small town. So she hangs up the phone and starts laughing. And I said, hey, I got a great sense of humor. Tell me so we both know. And she says, ectoplasm. She says, we've been doing this every night for weeks. I'm surprised this didn't happen sooner. I said, what, she said, Kevin,
It's the residual
every
energy.
night, this power of the universe is coming through me. And you're seeing what you're seeing visually. Imagine the force that's required. She said, usually comes off of the fingertips or out of the mouth of a medium.
Yeah.
I said, well, I didn't see any of that. I never saw any of that when you were in trance. Just saw what we saw when we came home. And she just kind of laughed it off. Well, the next thing of note, I think that you and your viewers would want to know about was what she called nature spirits.
Hold on, Kevin. Before you
Yeah.
go forward, now I want to say something. This is important. I mean,
okay, sure. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. I want to break this
A little
down
worked
for
up
you
here.
because it takes somebody's bloodline too to be able to. Your mother. You said your mother was Irish. And
My
your
mother's
dad-
Irish, and she had experience with the fairies that you really would blow your mind.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Was your mother? I thought I had heard you say once that your mother was Black Irish, which is a dark-eyed.
Her grandmother was. My mother had auburn hair, but her grandmother
Okay,
was black.
so let me go right there for just a second. Let me
Sure.
explain something. This could be something because, and now this, folks, is why history is so important.
That's right.
Because the Black Irish. Okay, does anybody know what Black Irish is? I'm gonna wait. Let's see if anybody in the
There's been a
audience
lot of
can tell
interpretations
me.
through the years. I'll be curious to see what yours is.
I'll tell you exactly what it is. If anybody knows, anybody at all wants to take a stab at it before I do this. No cheating and looking it up on your phone. Okay, I will tell you what that is. Do you realize that how the Spanish Armada was defeated by the English, right?
Thank you very much, Josh.
Right. Okay. So I will say this: they were not defeated. What happened was much like when the Japanese were invaded. Well, they tried to invade them. The Mongols, the divine winds destroyed their
Kamikazes.
fleet. Yeah, it's basically history repeated itself. The
Yeah.
Spanish Armada was destroyed by a freak storm.
The commas.
And so whenever that happened, a lot of the crew that survived this horrible, violent storm, they ended up in Northern Ireland. I kid you not. Some of them ended up in Shetlands, if you know what that is. But these people, and so they were in Ireland, they were Spanish, and the Irish actually protected them and hid them from the British soldiers that came to look for them because they were like, we believe that they crashed here. We see their boats are just scattered everywhere. And so they were hidden by the Irish. And of course, the Irish hated the English, and they're not going to help the British.
No.
So
Talk about their
enemy is
first
my
colony,
friend.
1,000 years of servitude.
Exactly. So the Irish, they actually became refugees and they interbred, and generations they had whole communities of these Spaniards. Now, one thing you got to understand though, and this is very important, is that a lot of times, especially when it came to Spain and Portugal, the people that manned these boats and did the average day-to-day heave-hoeing and lower the mast, raise the mast and all that, these were, a lot of times, they were the lesser, more undesirable. They're not going to use their powerful knights to go and do this, okay? So a lot of what happened after the Inquisition, the gypsies, okay, they were clever. They're very clever. They said, "Oh, wait, we're not Jewish. We're not Muslims. Don't kill us. We love Jesus." And we don't practice magic. And in fact, we will help you round up all those other bad people. We're just like you. We just look a little different, whatever. And so they made themselves necessary. So King Philip later pardoned a lot of them, but he said, you have to work. You're not going to just hang out and do magic tricks and all this other crap and pickpocket. You're going to work. And they're like, how are we going to work? Well, you're going to work on ships and you're going to be labor. So a lot of these Black Irish that ended up crashing and landing in Ireland were from a gypsy bloodline.
And that's the case with my grandmother Riley.
Yes. And so that also spawned off the Irish traveler.
That traveler.
So they have a very little bit of blood there that goes way back, but it was interbred with Irish. So you get people that kind of look like me, dark-haired, dark-eyed, and they're known as Black Irish, and they're Iberian, Celtic Spaniards that had interbred with Arabs, and then you had the gypsies. So that's what that bloodline is. So if you have that bloodline, that I can tell you will go 2-3 generations. You will have that ability to see these things. So when you were having these dreams, you're talking about these dreams, she knows right away, automatically, she can see it. And then you also have, and you can tell by Kevin, by looking, the high cheekbones, you have native in you for sure, 100%, that you got that for sure. So you have this Black Irish bloodline, and then you have the native bloodline. And so you have the ability to see. So it doesn't surprise me in the least that you've had a plethora of experiences, because a lot of times, as they say in Spanish, it's in the sangre, it's in your blood. And so that is a little bit of a history lesson. I thought that was important, because when you're talking to somebody, and if somebody is an adept,
you nailed it.
Yeah. So then I just wanted to throw that out there, because that made a lot of sense, what you were saying.
Well, there was very little known, because unfortunately my mom, her dad was not a nice man. When her mother became sick, the dad was already having an affair with somebody. And when my mother's mother died, they just stuck her in the orphanage, which was mostly run by Irish nuns. And my mother was only 6.5 and was so scarred by it that I don't know how many years later it was exactly. I was 32, 31. We took a train, and she made me stand in the spot up in Albany where she was standing when the nuns told her mother was dead. And when she left there at 17, as it all had to, she fell in love with a guy that wouldn't marry her because she was an Irish Catholic. And I didn't realize when she was telling me all this that there was a stigma back then. I just couldn't believe it, you know. I had to get in a fist fight with a guy in London in the 90s that made it very clear that there was still a lot of anti-Irish sentiment in the world. Oh, but her own experiences, I'm not sure where you want me to pick up or would you like me to share. I was going to get to the nature spirits, but my mother's experience with the fairies is profound. What do you think? Want to go the nature spirits here? Because I didn't really know what they were. I certainly had read, enough horror. I was just drawn to horror movies, horror stories, everything. But to see, what looks like a werewolf in your living room, gargoyles, creatures, and so
sub-natured beings. But yes.
Well, she went into trance one night, and I don't remember how long after the prayer that this happened. But it started always the same way, the negative effect, the black form with the yellow around it. And then she's sitting about 5 feet from me. It was as if, and I didn't see a portal or anything like that, but it was literally as if a doorway opened, because there was right in front of me manifesting were these creatures. And the only reason she asked me why I wasn't frightened when I described in detail what I saw. And I said, because every time you start these sessions, you always the energy that fills the room is so laden with peace, and I feel such a comfort. I never feel even vaguely disquieted in any of the things I ever saw or experienced there. And so I saw and she said, what did it look like? I said, they look like freaking gargoyles and werewolves, and I described each of the things that I saw in detail at the time. And she said, well, the nature spirits, we see them when we're young. When we lose our innocence, we lose our ability. And of course, lifetime after lifetime, we're reflections of all the choices we made. The way we like our food, the way we like our sex, the things that interest us, we pick up where we left off like grooves in a record. And that's why when kids are Mozart and others are chemists and others are football player, What we give energy to, we give life to. So that being said, she said to me, it's the universe is arranged in an orderly way, despite evidence to the contrary, or appearances to the contrary. So these are nature spirits. Animals can see them, and children can see them, and some adults continue to see them, depending upon their own personal karma. So, and by the way, speaking of my mother came barreling out there to see who her little boy was shacked up with, because I was a slow starter with girls, but a fast learner. And she went out to visit my mom, and in the middle of dinner, now I was under the impression I was Italian. My mother couldn't tan because being a pure Celt, she was either white or red. And she loved the sun. So it was really hard torture for her to have to carry an umbrella to go to lunch. But she, I would get really dark, and when you're young, it seems, I think it's harder for us as we get older to have the same tan as well. But I don't know. So anyways, she came out, we went to dinner, the three of us, and in the middle of dinner, out of nowhere, Meredith just looks at my mom and said, "By the way, Rita, why didn't you ever tell Kevin about his Native American heritage?" And my mother turned as red as a tomato. And I looked over, I look at Meredith, and I feel like the little kid in the movie Shane, look at the gunfighters back to back with Jack Palance and Alan Ladd.
I remember.
And my mother, recovered her poise quickly. I give her credit. She said, "Well, I don't think it's any of your business, Meredith." And Meredith, without missing a beat, said, "You're right, but it certainly is his."
Yeah.
But my mother wouldn't talk about it until I was diagnosed with cancer many years later. And I bring this up because, and when I asked Meredith, she said, you don't even know who you are, do you? She said, "I don't have to be psychic to see that. You want to see it in your face?" And I said, "I can." And those days I had really blonde hair, which was another puzzle because all the people in our family were dark. My mother had auburn hair. She was the only one that was. Anyway, so she said this. There's a lot of light hair and light-eyed people on the res, Kevin. You obviously never been to a reservation yet. I said, "I'm freaking Italian and Irish. What are you talking?" So, my whole roots were being questioned, and I felt challenged and confused. And the irony of being so meticulously oriented towards classifications historically, all the things that you do as a pseudo academic, and then not have a clue about your own background is, well.
You had to look at the high cheekbones though and be like, "Hey, what is this? I mean, why do I look?" Because you do have a lot of, and a lot of times skin tone it's very odd because like Anthony, he's dark. He's my nephew, and I'm very light skinned, but his mother is very light skinned. His dad is kind of in between, but he looks like his dad, a lot like his dad. I mean, there's no doubt who his dad is.
Well, what didn't escape me, what I didn't realize was that I got really dark, but I was never getting an olive. I got a deep copper brown, reddish brown.
I can turn olive, Kevin, but I can also sunburn if I'm out too long.
Oh yeah, well, it's me too. So I mean, but so that's a little. I thought that was interesting to me, at least. And as far as how that reflects in my own mother's role in this, leave it to my mother to upstage me, as I like to say. My mother was very, well, you can imagine being stuck in an orphanage when you're 6.5 years old and being so scarred by it, you make your only child stand in the exact same spot 30 years later. So she went back to Ireland whenever she could afford to. She'd take a trip back there. She was more into the political stuff. I was more into the history and mythology, but she was too. And she went to some areas, some of the mystical areas where the Druids had ceremonies, but she didn't bother to tell me that until well along, almost at the end of her life. In fact, it was at the end of her life. And I mention this because at that time, I had, as you know, come out to California. I stayed for 10 years. And then I came back home. My mother's best friend, who was a very profound influence in my life. Looked like a tall version of Elizabeth Taylor, if you can imagine. Talk about black Irish, just unbelievable, like a fertility goddess with the face of a queen. And very profound. My mother's best friend, and she said, "You got to come home. Playtime's over. Time to get back to your mom needs you and misses you." And so I came back there, and a few years later, I put the band together, started working. I had been a sideman out in California. I went back home. I created the Juke Joint Jokers and started working, and enough to pay the bills, call myself a working musician. And my mother got real sick, had something I don't remember what it was. She wasn't real sick. It was just something that had an surgery had to take this. I'm ashamed to say I can't remember what it was. The point being, and she called me on the phone and she said, Kevin, I want you to come down. And she was so serious that I immediately leapt like a starving panther to conclusions of the most dubious nature. And she immediately read my mind like she did. She said, no, don't worry. It's okay. But we need to talk. So I go hurtling down to this hospital on the old Georgetown Road in Bethesda, Maryland. And when I walked in, she was sitting up in bed and there was an air of expectancy in the room. And she looked at me with almost some amusement, but there's some gravity. And she said, I want you to sit down for once. Don't talk. And before I could reflex say anything, she said, son, I love you, but you're nothing. I'm not giving hyperbole. But don't say a word. I have a lot to tell you. And I immediately start looking around the room at the pillbox. She says, no, everything's okay. I just got to share this with you. So I look at her, like, what could possibly, presage this? So she says, I was coming back from lunch one day. She was working at a law firm, I think called Stewart. Father and son law firm in Washington, D.C. And I had to take the bus to meet Johnny, who was a friend of hers, an English friend of hers, for lunch. And when I was coming back, I stepped off the bus into a 14th, 15th, 16th century Irish village. I said, what? And she put her hand up. She said, don't talk. Well, you can imagine the frustration I felt. Like, how do you lead off with something like that and not expect a retort of some kind? And before I could say anything, she launched into it. She said, I stepped off of this bus into an old ancient Irish village, and a little tiny woman, couldn't have been 4 feet tall, walked up to me jabbering away in Gaelic. Now, my mother had not spoken the tongue much because when they put her in the orphanage, everyone had to speak English.
Yeah.
It was just what they were, there was a lot that could
Yeah,
speak.
outlawed Gaelic, so.
That's right. They a lot of them could still speak it, but it was really frowned on. Even the nuns wouldn't converse in it, and they were mostly Irish in that place. St. Colman's was the name of it. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, or I guess I'll find out. So she said this woman made some kind of gesture in the air that she took as a blessing, and took her by the hand. And she said, I was surprised by the vigor and she's a little tiny thing, and starts to drag me through this village, thatched roof huts, and stone, little. She said it was just surreal. And she's jabbering 100 miles an hour in Gaelic, and I couldn't make out enough to figure out what she was saying because I had been around people who spoke it in so long. And
do you speak any Gaelic?
No, don't make me tell that lie. I do not.
I know a little bit.
I know. I think I know some curse words, but
I know which is like top of the morning. I know a few things in Gaelic. But it's funny, though, really quickly, I want to say this, is that originally that was who was there before the Anglos arrived. So it's funny how the Gaelics were actually there during the time of the Romans. They were Gauls.
Actually, there were two different. There were the Gaelic and the Brythonic Celts, spoke a different language, but they're both considered Celtic. The Gaelics were the first, and they're the more Iberian-looking, darker. The Brythonic are people with hair look like mine and spoke a different, and they warred with each other, which is one of the reasons why, the Romans and English could beat them, is because they couldn't stop fighting among themselves long.
Yeah, that's what the problem was. Like Queen Boudica, like if they would have had the support. And so they were, but they originally, their relatives were in France.
That's right.
The Gauls that's who they were.
The Gauls.
Yeah. And so that's who, and it's funny how they just ended up warring with everyone that was really just their own blood. In fact,
Boudica was Iceni, which is a Belgae tribe. Yeah. And the Belgae were Caesar's toughest enemies in Gaul. They were the ones on board of the Germans who had to deal with the Germans who, more removed from civilization, were more fierce and harder to deal with. The Gauls got softened over time. You got to get a guy drunk.
They did. They became more Romanized, and then the Germani, who actually they were sort of a mixture of the Scandinavian and then they were a mixture of that and Gaul. Like if you took the Gauls, which were basically
Yeah,
Celts, and
the
you blended-
Belgae were, yeah,
yeah, and Belgaes gave the name to Belgium.
that's
you know?
right. They were proud of
and-
their Germanic origin, but they're also
Yeah.
proud of being Celts. And they, in fact, when the not the Kimmery, but the Teutons.
Yeah, the
and-
Teutons were the red-haired, blondish red-haired Germans, and they lived further to the northeast. But they were
the Kimbrians. The Kimbrians and the Teutons were a two-pronged attack that destroyed almost every Roman army they fought. This is when Marius reformed the army and made it the fierce machine.
Yeah, and Marius, and he trained them so hard that his soldiers became known as Marius's mules,
right?
because they never stopped training, and he even trained people to death. But the problem was the fear of the Germans. It scared the crap out of them. They were
the Belgae were very proud.
They had.
The Belgae were very proud. Excuse me for interrupting. I'm sorry.
No. We're just talking history here. I just think it's very interesting because I could sit here and go over the whole. I mean, we could talk history all day long, but that's not where we're here. But
I know. Well, so we'll get back. We rein me in here. So my mother is leading, being led by the hand through this village, and this woman is jabbering away in Gaelic the whole time. And she said, I said, well, what was it? She said, Mom, what was it like? She said, it was beautiful. She said, it looked, and I use this phrase myself to describe things later, like a Maxwell Parrish painting, but there was an eeriness to it that it wasn't like spooky bad, but it was. And then at some point, I realized she had led me like in a circle right back to the place because I remember the stone and that tree. And then she, again, with this almost blessing, said something, and then everything disappeared. And she said, I'm looking at sidewalks and buildings again, and I hear the bus pull off. And what I thought was 10 minutes was like 10 seconds.
But it was like it had been a long time, right?
And that when you're in that other place, time doesn't really exist. Certainly not the way we
She could have gone into what we would call a fairy hole, which is like you go into like a portal and you're transported back in time. That's really interesting, though, that somebody came up to her and was talking to her. Well, what are your thoughts, Kevin? What do you think it was?
You don't know how many times I tried to get my mother to sit down and talk about many things that, unfortunately, I didn't have the best relationship with my mother. When I started working at a young age, I mean, I say young, I would think that most people have to learn, men especially, responsibility, what it is to work. By the time you're 14, 15, I certainly did. My mother said, when I'm gone, you'll have no one. So you better learn how to take care of yourself, because we didn't have any relatives, really. My mother turned her back on what few there were when she left the orphanage because she was bitter.
Yeah.
And I didn't blame her. So I started to work, and never looked back. Taught myself how to play guitar. I'd come home from these backbreaking blue-collar jobs, brick and block, road work.
Music was your outlet, right?
And I played with that guitar. I'd fall asleep with it in my hands. And I was listening. Those days we had records, so I'd listen to basically the Three Kings, Albert, Beebe, and Freddie King, and put the phonic needle back and forth over and over until I could build a vocabulary. And anyway, getting back to my mom, how many times I tried to get her to talk about my father. I only had one picture of him, and in the picture, he's at the beach. You can see he's got jet black hair, and you can see the Native American, indigenous looking profile, the caricature almost of the nose and the. In fact, I got my ass beat dyeing my hair black once because I wanted to look so much like my dad. I never met him, never laid eyes on him. My mother was really, as fascinating as she was with her Irish heritage. And I got a picture on Facebook of her with Jerry Adams, if you know anything about Sinn Féin and the IRA.
Mm-hmm.
My mother
I know a lot about the IRA.
Yeah, my mother was followed by the Secret Service. She was, they tapped her phones. I've been through it, buddy, in more ways than one. But getting back to my mom and the fairies, away with the fairies, as I say, I asked her if she could tell me the places she went over there, because she had mentioned one place at a party. And as she got older, she joined what she was called the Irish Caucus. She wanted to really, experience her roots. It gave her identity that was obviously lacking, But so I heard her refer to that place. And when I tried to get her to talk about it later, when she, when the party was over, she wouldn't talk about it. I never understood why. But we had a tough relationship. As I became a young man, she grew more and more distant from me. My mother fell in love with a guy, as I told you, I think, that wouldn't marry because she was an Irish Catholic. Mom had issues. And she came out to California and she started working for a doctor who catered a lot to the Hollywood elite, the actors, as I mean by that. And she segued from that to working for Sarah Churchill, Winston's daughter. And my mother, who hadn't even finished school, she met my dad at one of these parties. And the story that I got from my mom finally, when I wasn't responding well to the treatment for the cancer. And so she basically told me stuff she probably never intended to. And I don't know why I'm just telling you what I feel. And my dad had grown up in the res, and his father was Irish soldier fortune, they called him in those days. Fancy name for a mercenary. And had gotten a native girl pregnant and abandoned them. And then came back when my dad was 10 and plucked him away and made him work on a farm until the old man died of a heart attack, which time my dad was shuffled back to the res, at which point he discovered his mother had cancer. Time passed by and World War II hit. My dad went off to serve in the European theater. He was severely wounded at the Purple Heart. I think, from what I've told, that a lot of guys that got injured were presented with that medal. But he had a severe head injury. And my mom said it affected him a lot and made him even moodier than he already was. And unlike myself, he was very almost sullen, she said. But when you got him at the right time, he can be very, very loquacious. And was very learned for a guy that never finished 8th grade, she said. So he goes back from the war, and now his sister's got cancer. And when she died, it just broke him. So he left there and came out west and met my mom at this party, and I'm the result. He basically told my mom that my mom was terrified about. She was such a strict Catholic. My mom was exactly 5 minutes late for mass every Sunday, but she never missed a Sunday. But she really was, her faith kept her going. In fact, the woman that kept my mother safe and relatively sane in that awful place, Sister Mary Assumption, this is her rosary that I hold here on my neck. Nothing fancy about it.
Well, it's pretty. Is that silver?
Yeah.
Oh,
All
wow.
the stuff I wear is Celtic and it's silver. These are 100 years old.
I see the Celtic cross there. That's Irish Celtic cross right there.
That's my father, Raymond Murray himself, I have you know. And these are both. They're 80 years old when she gave them, so they must be 100 now. And these rings, they're all silver.
A lot of energy there.
Yeah, there is. And so I'm trying to give you as much as I can. I can remember. I think it's pertinent. I think your viewers will find. I hope will find.
If you have pure silver and you stick it in milk, it'll keep it from going bad.
Did not know that.
It's actually a true thing. Yeah, you can actually do that as long as it's real. Now, if you got silver that's a little bit of alloy in it and you throw it in the milk, you might end up eating some curds. But
well, when I had these dreams about the vampires because of the, you mentioned these silver. I started wondering, and the more I've learned, the more I've been exposed to it. For a long time, I lived in a very narrow world by anyone's definition. I'm terribly impressionable, so I stayed with music. Didn't own a TV for like 30 years. Then when I watched the news, kept the vibration of music, and it kept me focused. It kept me centered. It kept me feeling. I don't want to sound too pretentious here. Ennobled almost. I was doing something special, something sacred, because to me, I remember my mother once, she said, "What are you thinking of?" I had the headphones on, and I was listening to Hendrix, Band of Gypsies, live at the Forum. And I said, "What, Mom?" I pulled the ear off. She was, "What are you thinking right now?" I said, "God." And that's what great music makes me think of. That's the sacred place it takes me to. So, that being said, my mother, She was very into Irish heritage. She didn't have. There's no more experiences with the Fae that happened, because I would remember that. But I don't know. Are you asking about the vampires? Maybe this is a good time. I've had these Persean dreams. They happen about once every 2 years, and they're usually eerily significant. Um, the guy that I dreamed about, the first one I shared with you, which was the first one of note, I dreamed about that guy again 30 years later, and I was in prison. I was in a terrible place. I got in 3 fights in the first 24 hours, and to protect me, they put me in solitary. And I remember getting on my knees and praying to all the masters that hadn't given up on me to save me from dying in such a shameful way, in such an awful place. And I was so exhausted. I'd been walking with the leg irons on for all the time they were booking me. And I fell asleep literally kneeling over my bunk. I'm kneeling, right? Chest on my, and I dreamed I'm back in Maryland. And I hear the sound of a truck. And it's a county truck. And it's KC. But this time he's wearing work clothes. And he's waving at me, "Hey, Cabin," and that southern voice rolls down the window, waves me. I wake up, goosebumps everywhere. I had to go see my parole officer later that day. She said, "You weren't freaked out by that dream? Like it was coming to omen?" No ominous, no omen here. I knew I was going to be okay. They dropped the charges 3 days later. But I have some Perseid dreams that are so mind-blowing that I don't know which one to share. But I'll jump way ahead, and I wanted to set it up by giving some things showing some ones that were really profound, but I don't know how much time you have, and I don't want to presume. But I've never had something, I've had bad dreams like all of us, but these were different. I hadn't had one of these special dreams, these sendings, as my mother called them, in a long time. Right before I came back to California, and I've been back here now 12 years, I had a dream that I was looking at 2 rows, like people posing for a high school picture, 2 rows of freaking vampires, men and women, both. And they were glaring at me with such malevolence and such awareness that I woke right out of it. And I had goosebumps again like usual, but this time.
What do you think it meant?
Brother, I have no idea. Other than I knew that they wanted me to know they existed.
Oh yeah.
This is way before this. I knew of these shows and experiences. I knew that things were, I, by my virtue of my own life, knew that things were way outside the catechism of, things taught in school and
Catechism.
But vampires? So I had just recovered from that when a week later I had the dream again. Only basically, I can't say if they were exactly all the same ones, the same freaking idea. And they were glaring is the only word. It was a very ominous, threatening, "We know who you are. We want you to know who we are. We want you to know that we exist. And this is real."
Before you go any further, because I've heard a little bit of this, but I want to presume.
Go ahead.
But I know that whenever people, because you're not the first person that's told me, or you, Tony, or Anthony, that they've had dreams of these beings and they don't even know who they are. But people will also have dreams of people from their past, and they'll be told, "Hey, we exist." It's like there's something that in them that wants you to know. But I think part of it is that there's a fear element there that if you want that removed, then they'll come to you, and then you can be my words, you can be parasitized by this, which I think is one of the reasons why silver and gold, solid gold, real gold, affects them, because it is antimicrobial. People don't realize that. Like 24 karat gold is almost pure gold. And then you have silver, which it's a pure metal. It's an element, and so these things have been used for centuries. I wouldn't say centuries, say millennium, to ward off against these things. Just like I said, you could preserve milk with silver. Colloidal silver is another remedy in your body. and it kills parasites. It will cleanse your body. And I think that, and this is going to be in my book too. I'm going to tell you something. I think that these vampires and what they do, it is a metaphysical thing, but I think that it's a parasite. And I think that they get the parasite, and I think it's directly related to the black goo. And so there's a hive mind there, and you may, and this is just me presuming, I'm not 100% sure, but from what I could tell from you and what you've told me and what I've heard, you were probably on the astral plane quite a bit. You were probably traveling quite a bit.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm sorry, but I get
somebody lives with you, right? Is there somebody there?
Yeah, I have a friend. Yeah.
Okay, because somebody walked by, and I was like, let's just make sure.
It's not an apparition, Josh.
That's not a shadow man.
Flesh and mortal, he's a man, I say. Anyway, God, what was I going to say? I was leaping, starving like a panther to. Where am I going to go? Fuck me. I give up. For 50 points.
Well, we were talking about the vampires, and they wanted you to know who they were. Yeah.
Well, shit. Oh well.
And I'm sorry, I had to throw that in there. I just
passage of time has worn inexorably on my consciousness. Yeah, the vampires. One of the takes on silver was the idea of Judas being sold for 30 pieces, selling Christ for 30 pieces. And I often wondered if that was more than just a clever concept in a movie. There's something allied to that, I do believe. This is my intuition. But that was the only experience it was like that I had. Damn it! I wish I was.
That was the only experience you had with the
vampires. Yeah, but that was enough. I mean, it was really. I had one other experience where I was actually terrified, where I was incapable of motion or thought for seconds. And that was when I was back home in Maryland, not far from my mother's house, where I don't know if it was a cryptid or it was something. It was a black. It was a huge figure that rose up in front of me in the woods, and I didn't get a smell or a growl, none of that. But it was a huge. It must have been at least 8 feet and broad as a barn. And there were no such thing as Sasquatch in that part of Maryland, man. There just isn't. We have the stories not far from where I live of the Goat Man.
Goat Man is big.
And I know people who have seen Dog Man, but I never had at that time. Damn it! I wanted to. There's something I knew would be very applicable to what we were saying. I'm at a loss of how to proceed.
Well, let's do this. Why don't we talk about what happened to you when you saw these other creatures, these other entities, these other things that you encountered
in the woods in Maryland that I just discussed?
Yeah, you can talk about that.
I bought a guitar that I had been wanting all my life, and I had been reading a lot about voodoo. I'd been playing with a lot of blues guys, at this point. I hung out with them. I knew something of what they call hoodoo, and not just from an academic, but from, living amongst, musicians, being on the road with them, the charms, spells, things that.
Do you believe it started with Robert Johnson?
Well, I believe that Robert Johnson was a guy that was, when he first showed up and played, he was laughable, they said. And he disappeared a year and a half later, reemerged, hearing the way we hear him on record. I think what happened was that he just woodshitted like a mother, and he joined a house, what they call a house, which is a group of the practicing voodoo people. And voodoo means of the spirit. It's not what people think of as spells and zombies. That's what they call palamayambi. That's not. Every religion has a side to it, of a dark nature, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But voodoo is just a beautiful integration of Catholicism and African worship, and then a type of African worship that's polytheistic and that exists from the west coast of Africa all the way to the Congo, and they different names maybe, but the same concept. And they realized when they were forced to become Christian, as mostly Catholics at the beginning, that the Catholics had as many saints as they did. So they created an interesting syncretism, of where they would St. Peter became Legba, for instance, and they could worship, in without being persecuted by creating this hybrid. And there were rites and things that went along with this. And Robert Johnson, I believe, joined a house where he became strengthened by the spiritual collective that he was among, with his fellow African Americans in a time when it was just, really awful to be outside in the limits of town in certain parts of the South after the sun went down. I say nothing of all the other stuff that they went through and are still going through. So anyway, I think Robert Johnson, your question, I don't know if he did, but there was enough talk about it. He wasn't the only one. And the movie Crossroads, which I heard you mention the other day, I know John Fusco a little bit, the guy who wrote that. And I wanted to get to that, and my friend from Underworld too, but there's only so much time, huh? But I was as naive and presumptuous as it sounds. I took my guitar at 12 o'clock on a full moon, and I went to the woods at a crossroads not far from my mother's house and walked into the woods. And I don't know what I expected to happen. I just had enough of a buzz on with some good weed to expect the best. But what happened was not what I expected at all. I wasn't 10 feet in the woods when something came. It just was, one minute it wasn't there, next minute it was. And I never felt terror like that in my life. I've had guns put to my head. I've survived 2 cancers. I've had my phones tapped and bugged by 2 different 3-letter agencies for years at a time. I know what fear is. Okay? I know what fear is. This was utterly unmanned me. I was literally incapable of motion. And whatever it was could have done anything it wanted to me. And when I was able to regain conscious, motion and thought, I just slowly backed up. And when I got close enough to the car, I just turned and ran like a child. I've never forgotten that. You wouldn't either.
What did it look like
But
to you?
yeah, it's almost pales. And when I think about some of the other things that happened, when I was talking about astral projection, that's what I was trying to get on. Stumbling, lurching, groping for that. I was, and I know a lot of you guys, a lot of us are fascinated with the idea of being able to have our consciousness leave our body. We all know that this isn't all there is. And even the greatest cynics, they may profess something externally, but in your heart of hearts, we know that there's something as wonderful, as terrible, as all of this is. There's something, we are air, so something truly majestic, truly incredible. And it's our responsibility to get to the heart of that and find out what that is, how, whatever stylistic, whatever existential uniform you want to wear while you're worshiping, we have to get to a place where we understand that we have a creator, we owe an allegiance to that creator, and we should cultivate that. And by cultivating that awareness, it gives us strength, guidance, and purpose simultaneously, And when I was reading about astral projection, I was very young, and when I met Meredith, I was consumed with the idea, Josh. And I'll tell you, at one point she said to me, Kevin, I'll do this. I promised you that I would do these sessions every night you asked, and I'll never break my word. But you're not going to grow just observing phenomena. You have to work at it like you do your guitar, your gung fu, your chess. And I said, well, how do I do that? I'm not exactly Mother Teresa, And she laughed. She said, no, but you're good inside, Kevin, Now, why don't you read this book? And she came out. She'd been talking. She'd been walking in the bedroom. She came back. And when you're done reading, I want you to send away for the lessons. I said, lessons? And she gave me the copy of Autobiography of a Yogi. She said, this guy, when he died, his body lay in state for 20 days without decomposing. It was written up in Time magazine, Los Angeles Times. I said, really?
It's a very interesting book.
It is.
Mhm.
And so, as fate or karma would have it, when I opened up the book, I just opened it up or opened it right to the page of chapter 43, where Yogananda's guru manifests in his hotel room after passing over what they call the Mahasamadhi, which is the conscious exit, when they just sit down in a lotus posture and they shut their breathing and heart down and they just leave. And he comes back and he explains in meticulous detail for pages the astral planes. And I just, as you can imagine, I jumped at that and I asked her to, she said, well, astral projection is not that hard. It is in the beginning because we have such a fear of leaving our body that when we actually start to do it,
Well, we
we
do it all the time.
yeah, but
It's
I mean,
the funny thing is
consciously. I mean, consciously.
doing it in no. Let me say something. Doing it in this consciousness,
Right. And I had read Teachings of Don Juan, how he talks about looking for your hands in your dreams to be fully conscious in the dream state, or lower astral, as they would call it. And so she said, there's techniques to do it. They're not hard. And she said, I'm surprised that I said, I have never done that, or I would tell you, So that was, we were just about to move to Long Beach when we were having this conversation. Her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Her mother also had the gift, as she called it, but her mother was a strict Catholic, like my mother, and it just terrified her. And Meredith decided that she wanted to move in with her mom, and I got a room. In those days, the YMCA rented inexpensive rooms at 6th and Long Beach Boulevard, which is a really tough neighborhood at the time, close to the pier down there, and adult bookstores like every 20 feet, and just. It just was like an outtake from a Twilight Zone crack. And I just, only crack didn't exist at that time. We're talking about like winter of 77. It was very surreal, man. That would be a polite way to describe. And I quickly, when I got there, went to work. I practiced my guitar all the time and I practiced these techniques. And I got very frustrated. She said, well, you're not getting up surprised that you're not, having more success, because I think you're fairly advanced. He said, in fact, I know you are. And I just, looked at her like the R.C. Victor dog and said, I'm not having, I feel like I'm floating. The closer I get, I feel like I'm in a bathtub, kind of floating, but I never get beyond that. And she said, nothing really, I'm beyond that. And I said, and the first couple of times I told her that was true. And then maybe the third time that I shared it, I said, there's other one thing I keep forgetting to tell you. She says, what's that? I said, I get this pressure right here. She said, right there? I said, where your third eye is. I said, yeah. She started laughing. She says, oh, well, his third eye's opening up and nothing's happening. She's being sarcastic. I said, well, that's all it's happening. She said, well, just keep going. That's a great sign. So we went to Long Beach, and there was a Denny's across the street. I never even heard of Denny's in those days. We didn't have them back in Maryland, D.C. So I went across the street one night. I was very frustrated. I don't know how long I'd been there. I think a few weeks at least. And I wasn't able to get beyond the buzzing in the third eye and the sensation of floating. And I went across the street to the Denny's. And when I walked in, I noticed that when I left the room, I didn't see any people until I got to the Denny's, which is right across the street. And when I walked in, it looked like everyone was tripping. And by that, I mean, it looked the way it looks like when you're coming on to hallucinogens and faces are rearranging themselves and the walls are breathing, and it looked like that. And I immediately, they had payphones those days, and I called them, and I had a payphone, and I said, what's going on? And she laughed. She says, well, you wanted to see behind the veil, and now you are. I said, what do I do? And she laughed again. She said, go back to your room, get some food, go back to your room, and practice there. Tomorrow night, I'm doing a double shift at the hospital. Come stay at my place. Try the techniques there. I think you're very close, based on what you just told me. And talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy. I went over to her apartment, which is in Belmont Shore, and I went to sleep early for me that night at 10:30, and I woke up at 1:20 in the morning, which is the exact time I was born. And the room looked charged. That's all I could tell you. The light, everything was different. There was like, I usually sleep with everything off, unlike nowadays, but the clock had a certain light to it. There was a couple other things, but I just knew that it presaged something. So I started to practice a technique, and I went right. I didn't have the feeling of going through a tube or a tunnel. I did not look back and see my body the way a lot of, did just none of that. 1 minute I'm in her bed, the next minute I'm in a valley lined by mountains that looked just indescribably beautiful. And the moon was huge. And I thought, well, if this is really the astral. I know that thought is immediately creative. You can will anything to be, and it's there. And time doesn't really exist. And so I willed myself to levitate, and I started to float up. And the minute that happened, the sensation drew me right back to my body. And I raised up, and I went, oh, man, I blew it. I was right there. And I was disappointed, as you can imagine. And I laid back down, and I went right back out. Only this time, I had the sensation of walking down a path that was lined with trees on either side, but it was very kind of ominous. There were no leaves on the branches. Spooky. There's no way to describe it. And although I wasn't really walking, I had the feeling, emotion going down this path. And once again, the fear drew me right back to my body. And when I raised up in bed, I went, I think I've done enough for tonight. And I pretty much clocked out. And that was my first experience, conscious experience, and astral projection. So, did we lose our host? Has he been kidnapped by aliens or what?
Oh no. He just had to deal with something for work. He had to get up real quick.
You guys wear a lot of different hats, I know. I want to tell you guys while I'm looking at you that you do such an amazing job. But the way that so easy to take things for granted,
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, he may be the tip of the spear, but there's a lot that goes into a great show. People, they go to a football game, they see the guy that scores, but nothing's possible without the line. Nothing.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a big team effort. Like
It is, and it
it
shows.
wouldn't be the same if you don't work together.
It's a serious production. I mean, it's. I watch a lot of different things. I spend a lot of time with my craft, or I try and stay in shape physically. I meditate. I play, but I don't really, indulge in too many things. But this, when I started to realize that things like this were accessible, threw myself into it, and I've seen a lot of different shows, and this is really head and shoulders above. Just how you're able to draw from so many, different sources, into one seamless kind of existential tapestry. It's really enviable, and you'd be applauded, guys.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, just back up for a second. You were talking about voodoo.
Oh yeah.
And hoodoo, which is like technically the two heads of the same coin,
right?
But they're a little bit different. What
Yep.
it is too is a lot of marriage of Catholicism mixed with African culture that was brought over through the slave trade. But one of the things that I heard you say on another show, and I wanted to bring it up here, and I thought it would be an interesting thing to talk about to my audience. And I have my own theory, and I'm working on a book about the dark side of music. It's just been kind of a project I've had on the back burner, but I keep adding to it. But it's gotten so vast that now I have to kind of break it up into little pieces. And so kind of working on the 27 Club.
Wow.
And I think that number 9 is a very important thing too, especially in rituals and things. But I've always wondered, because Robert Johnson, he went to the crossroads. Okay, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but when he talked to the quote unquote devil, and looking back on this now, and I wanted to bring this up when you were on the show, because you're a musician and you've talked about these things, and I'm going to say this to my audience. I may at some point have encountered this in particular entity. We did a show called Black Hellhounds of Taylor, Texas, when my friend Tony Duran, who I used to box with at South Austin Recreation Center, came on the show, and we saw this. He looked like a dark-skinned Hispanic man, or maybe a African American. I don't know, but he was walking. He looked like, and I've talked about this before, he looked like some sort of like entity, but he was surrounded by black dogs. And I've often wondered if Papa Legba.
That's the guy.
If that was him, because he appears to different people for different reasons, and he can also. He's sort of like in Voodooism, he's not necessarily like a bad guy, but he's sort of the intermediary. And he's also been compared to different saints, in particular Saint Peter, and
Yes.
even Lazarus. They and you know, and but to invoke what's going on? You got something going on.
I'm sorry, my cat's trying to. I try to keep him from killing this mouse. I hate.
Papa Legba's got him. He said, "You've been doing something. Go mess with that man while he's talking to that."
He's just doing his job, but I've saved 4 mice from him since I moved here, and I don't want to. I hate seeing things get killed, man. Yeah, I love animals, and I know I understand nature. I get it, But I'm sorry. Forgive me for.
No. But anyway, Legba he's associated with Saint Anthony.
Well, I didn't know that, but you know that St. Peter, the role he plays, the gates of heaven, Legba, before, you probably know this, before any voodoo ceremony is done, you have to call Legba first. Then the other deities will manifest, but he's got to be the first guy. And he's the messenger, like Mercury as well. He's kind of like Mercury, and apparently he plays a big role on the internet. But I'm out of my depth there. And
I would strongly suggest, and I think this is what could have happened. I think that Robert Johnson communed with Legba. And I think that Legba got him in touch with, and then there's different deities, entities, demons, angels, whatever you want to call them, that deal with music, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, Legba is the one that kind of throws the dice and says, "Hey, do you want to play?" And when you say, "Yo, well, let's do this," that's when the fun begins, and it's not going to be fun. I'm telling you. I personally don't believe that he is anything like one of the saints. I think he's evil. That's my opinion.
I don't know. I'll just say that this mythology has been going back to Paganini, who's rumored the violin virtuoso, that he had done a similar deal. My experience with the people that I know in Santeria, people literally that practice it, and what people call voodoo, is that it's been misrepresented. The dark side of it, what is called Palamayambi, that's where you get the demons and the evil spells and the zombies. But the voodoo itself is just it's a beautiful religion. But I know there was a big when the courts allowed them to practice legally without being harassed. I remember the argument by the priest saying, "Well, what difference are we from the kosher butcher, who kills the animal in a very merciful way? We do the same thing. We share the food with the congregation."
Well, kosher.
I'm not an advocate.
Not very.
Got no agenda here. Pardon me.
I said kosher butchering is not very merciful. They slit the throat and the animal bleeds out.
That was his argument to the Supreme Court.
It's not very.
I don't have a dog in this race. I'm just I'm just saying.
Well, it's really and what it is it was Christianity that was mixed with West African, And,
right.
And a lot of the slaves that came over were from West Africa, and the Ivory Coast and that region. And there's a lot in Liberia, that whole region. And there's still a lot of, the dark side that goes on over there.
Hold that thought. I got to save a life. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, when you go back to what Kevin is talking about, this, and he's saying Papa Mayambe, it's like that's the bad side or whatever. I say this, a good witch is just one insult away from being a bad witch, and that's the truth. Because when somebody practices,
it's Magic Sam.
He's a big boy. He looks like a real good cat.
Hey, they're saints. They're little angels, man. Come on.
I love animals. Cats and dogs are amazing. I have 3 cats and 3 dogs.
They're the best. Yeah, sometimes I think we don't deserve them, but they're just beautiful.
No, we don't. And people have just abused the hell out of animals.
Sometimes I
know,
think I would join a force that would do nothing but hunt people down who do evil things to animals because
you
they're
don't
just.
already do that. I thought
Pardon
everybody
me?
did that. I tell you what, though, I do respect you because, like, in my family, Kevin, I will say this: everybody in my family is musically inclined. They all could sing or they played instruments. Anthony plays the guitar. He was also a master trumpet player.
Wow. I
He
love the
won
trumpet.
awards and stuff for all that. And so my brother can play keyboard. He can play the guitar. His son plays guitar. My dad could play a guitar. I even watched my dad plunk a banjo one time, which I don't even know where he learned that. But my mother could sing. She was musically inclined, very beautiful voice. My sister could sing and she could play a trumpet too. She played trumpet, clarinet, and she could play the piano. And she taught herself, which was really amazing. And then Anthony, your mother played, what was it? Clarinet, trumpet, something. They all played something, and me, flat out nothing. I can do nothing musical. And so when people would ask me, they'd be like, why does your entire family, they're like a band and you're just there? Like, I'm the pugilist. I learned to use my fists and was really good with what I did. And so there's
Yeah,
that.
you have other gifts, Ken.
I have other gifts. I can't, just astral project at will like some of the maniacs out there who have claimed. That would be a pretty amazing thing to do. But I will say this, folks, if you ever find yourself out of your body, and it could happen because you could wake up in this consciousness. Now, it depends on the vibration. And I personally think, Kevin, you were traveling quite a bit. And I think that's how these vampires just kind of rode that. They followed you in to this consciousness and they threatened you. But I can say this, if you're ever out of your body, folks, don't panic because you're attached to a silver cord and it will pull you back.
Yes, you are.
But if you get too far out into these other realms, it could come down to you not being able to find your way back. But I always say this, there's one way that you will always find where you're supposed to go. It may not be where you want to go, but he'll take you to where you need to go, and that's Jesus Christ.
Right.
Because I've called on him more times than I can count. Kevin, I've ended up in some weird realm in the sky, which I still to this day don't know. It was like I was in some sort of cloud city type thing, and I felt like I was about to be arrested.
He's the most powerful of the gurus, of the saints, in my opinion.
Jesus is the boss, and I just said, Christ help me, and I was released. Now that was when I was out of my body, and I was a young man, and I just thought, what a weird dream. But I know now that it wasn't a dream,
Right?
But at the time, I just thought it was a dream,
There, in the autobiography Yogi, you'll hear the mention of Mahavadar Babaji, who was pretty much the head of that line, the order that ended with Yogananda. And there's some great chapters in there where he talks about communing with Christ, and you no doubt have discovered Christ going through accounts all over Tibet, northern India.
Yeah, because he traveled through the Silk Road.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
he spent 6 years in the ashrams, in the Indus Valley, but he was asked politely to leave because he told them that the caste system was not correct and the Brahmin priest wanted to kill him.
That conversation happened. Yep,
it did happen, and he was in Kathmandu. Same thing. The top brass told he didn't like that. Now people will say, no, that's not correct because there's no such thing as reincarnation. They took it out of the mainstream Bible because they didn't want people being able to say, well, if we act kind of bad, we take Mardi Gras a little too far.
Yeah, Justinian removed it.
We'll we'll just come back and do it again. It's not so bad if I come back as a rhino or a cat. No, they didn't want that, so they said no. There is no that, but then they had to change what Christ kept saying, you must be born again, you must be born again, you must be born again. He's not just talking about the flesh, because it's often said, and by Christ, as in the flesh, as in the spirit, as is above, is below, and it's a mirror image. And so when Jesus, says these things, they love to try to usurp Jesus's role and try to say that it was somebody else, or it was this, or it was that. And the bottom line is this. the only way to truly know is to be in the spirit. And that is to me very, very, very important. And it sounds like you had a lot of very potent experiences. And I think that it all stemmed from a spiritual bloodline. That's my opinion. And I think that you, as a being, a very powerful spiritual being, you're being modest. You say, well, I don't want to say this because then it sounds self-aggrandizing, but just be honest. I mean, because then there's honesty. You have to be honest. You've had a lot of experiences, and I've heard some of your story. Like you've gone through the ringer, and to still be here and be coherent and be, able to retell it is a testament. I don't agree with everything. Like I don't agree with Papa Legba being a good guy.
Oh, I'm not saying he's a good guy, but I'm not. I think Voodoo in general has been misrepresented. But I want to share something with you that when I left, Meredith and I broke up at one point. I was using her. I had fallen out of love, and it wasn't right. She still was young enough to get find a man that would provide for her what I couldn't any longer. But we're in good terms. We were on good terms, and I came back from Long Beach down to Laguna, and I was young. It wasn't long before I had another girlfriend, and I had the second of those many prescient dreams, and I dreamed I was in like a Civil War era house looking for a medium, and I was with my new girlfriend. And it was a really like a 3-level big house. The third floor was very high, and I said something to Annie. I said, I'm going to go up here. I think she's up here. And I got up to the top floor. I walked into a beautifully furnished but completely empty room. And just as I turned in the dream to call for Annie, I hear a voice giggling. And I look over, and there's a little girl in the corner of the room. There was a window. And I thought, how is she? She's the medium, because she had to be levitating because we're 3 floors up. And I yelled at Annie, she's up here, she's up here. I turned back into the room again. The little girl was gone, and sitting exactly the same 45-degree angles Meredith said every night in trance was a grown woman. And somehow I knew that the girl and the woman were the same. Mm. And the woman looked up at me and she said, have patience, man of faith. And just then the phone rang, and it was the only musician I knew who had read the autobiography of Yogi, at least in that I knew in that town. And he was waking me up to take me to my first service at this meditation temple, And that dream was of all that I've had a lot of amazing dreams, just to have one. I hadn't had one in a couple of years, I've just recently had another one. And my mother used to call them sendings. And I don't know why they happened for me. I don't feel particularly worthy of it at times, It's not that I have a real poor self-image. It's just that, they're blessing. And so many things have happened in my life, made me question, as we all do, our faith, the veracity of things, These gifts, you're like, why should I get that? Are there people, everyone around suffering and questioning the warp and woof of things and the why? And
why not you, though? You're not, and by your own admission, you're not a saint, but you're not an ungodly person. And you care a great deal.
Well, Meredith said to me, she said, Kevin, we pick up where we left off. Mm-hmm. So work every minute hard at being better, because we get grace. Every now and then the Creator blows in the sails of our boat, moves us forward, and we feel it. And we know that we know. But, the mendacity and the things that we have to struggle with so much, just that it's the way it's supposed to be. It's like, why does it have to be so much evil? It's like, I heard you talk on the show not long ago, and I don't remember exactly what you said, but it made me think of the quote in Isaiah, where God says, I create the light and the dark. I create good and evil both. I, the Lord, do these things. So the grand play, the grand, drama was ordained, as they say. And I wish it wasn't so. I wish we all could be in bliss. One yogi once said, "What would be the point then?" Well, that's another conversation. But these dreams have, I was getting to a point where not long ago I was so low in spirit, and I felt so worn out. I was really having a difficult time. And I've been writing articles off and on for chess.com for a while. They say write what you know. I don't know much, but what I know I'm really passionate about and try and bring some life to things that people could resonate with them, And the guy I was working for, I had stopped working for a while, and he promised to send me some dough for an article I was writing. And he said, if I can't, get it to you in time, because I wasn't sure whether I could get it edited in time for the what you call it, the timeline. But he said, I'll try and send you something in a card for Christmas just to get you through, And I didn't want to admit it, but I found myself looking in the mail every day. And to no avail. And numbers are funny, For me, 13 is an important number. 1 and 3 is 4. They say to add numbers. And 4 appears many, many ways in my life. 10, 12, 54 is my birthday, which is 76. 76 is 13. 1 and 3 is 4. The last four digits of my social security are 4414, which is 13. 1 and 3 is 4. I lived for 13 years in an apartment 1 and 13. I could keep going.
Well, I can tell you right now, if you're a 4 life path, you love your love.
Don't, because I'll forget what I was talking about.
Okay, all right. We won't go there. Go ahead, keep going.
Where was I?
You were talking about 13. You were talking about you lived in an apartment for 13 years.
Before that, I'm serious.
Before that, what were we talking about before that?
What was it?
Come on, guys, reel me in.
We'll try. I had gotten up to so,
but it pertained to a story that he was telling.
No doubt, had to do with numbers. Terrible.
Well, you said 13 was a very important number.
Yeah. What was I saying right before that? And that'll help.
I can't.
Rewind this machine.
We could rewind it, but we can't.
I'm joking.
Live. If we weren't live, we could lay it
right.
out.
I know. Okay. When last our criminal gang was, I got nothing.
Well, somebody in the chat said something I thought was interesting, and they asked Elastic Machinery if they'd ever heard of the Patal. Do you guys know what the Patal is? Does anybody know what that is?
I've never heard of it.
It sounds like a Hindu word.
It is, actually. It is. It's a Sanskrit. And the Patal, it refers to the subterranean realm under the earth. It's basically the inner earth. And that's somebody was talking about that. I thought that was interesting. I put it up there to bring it up because, diary, like the book you were talking about of a yogi.
Autobiography of a yogi?
Autobiography of a yogi, yeah. My brother read it. I started to. I never finished it. But then he gave me every bit of the information and cliff notes that you could possibly. So I feel like I've already read it because he talked about it.
You've got one coming to you in the mail. But this book here, The Holy Science, which was written by his teacher, which is about the yugas that I told you about.
That's a good one, too. Yeah, I had that one somewhere.
This is the most succinct tome that I've ever seen in spirituality and the interpretations of Christian scripture. It's interesting when you see anything of that repute, any scripture that's interpreted by a man or woman of wisdom, when there's something it reminds us of our common spiritual origin, because when we're in the right place and we hear that we know it's right. It doesn't really matter who's saying it. There's some common chord struck, and we know. And as I said earlier, we know that we know. And that book, it talks about the third eye, when it takes basic scripture from the New and Old Testament in the hands of an enlightened one. And when these guys these great ones could stop their heart and mind at will. I mean, their heart and their breath at will. They this is a lofty, more important than what that implies physiologically. The consciousness that these, that is attained, allows you to look through things and get to the essence of them. Whereas lesser mortals would struggle, more. And that's what the important is, to get right back to how we started, was the importance of environment, the things you take in, the things, the people you surround yourself with, because we are impressionable, and it behooves us to try and cultivate that, strike that cosmic tone, and give it the energy it deserves. And this madness and this gauntlet we're all running through.
It's like swimming in toxic soup.
Yeah, and the ego, of course, is the main culprit. The me, I. I've got to be right. As I'm insulted. I am, that's the biggest culprit. Easier said than done, isn't it? But and nothing profound to anyone out there. You all know what I'm talking about, But I really believe that the Creator loves us, with perfect love, and that despite appearances, that things are going just the way they're supposed to. We live in amazing times, and very chaotic and cruel times, and times that'll test anyone's faith. But if I could leave anyone, if I could presume to say anything important tonight, I would say that, lean into your faith. Lean into your faith. And as I said earlier, God doesn't care about our mistakes. He cares about our indifference.
And one of the things I was going to say, a lot of what people, because you talk about things that would be classified as New Age, and I'm going to say this, and people may get offended, but a lot of what people are talking about and calling the New Age is really just a revisiting of very, very, very
absolutely
ancient teachings.
Absolutely.
And they allowed it to be usurped by officials that said, hey, this is what God said, this is what Jesus said. And I don't have a problem. People say I take issue with the Old Testament. What I take issue with is the priesthood not being correct.
That's right. The Judaic Christian need for power. They hid the knowledge.
They did. And that is where we're at. And that is a problem. So you have two power bases. One is completely atheistic and you can see for what it is. And then there's one that it proclaims itself to be godly, and it is not. And both of them are false temples. They're twin pillars of evil, as far as I'm concerned. And I tell people that it's, there's a lot in this world that I just don't agree with. And I could tell you, and I make a statement like I say World War II never should have happened. People are like, how can you say that? You have never. It's because I've read about 1 million books on the subject and how easily it could have been prevented. There was a lot of things at any given point. And at some point, I need to at least write an essay about this. If I could write, better. But I type like a chicken pecking,
You and me both. You should do it though. It'll be a catharsis.
Points, it's like there are so many different points where it could have been averted, could have been averted, could have been averted, could have been averted, could have been averted. And it just keeps going and going and going. And you're like, at that point, it could have stopped. At that point, it could have stopped.
One of the most essential things that was hidden from us, was taken from us, was the knowledge of being able to move the life force through the art of the breath. I found that when I was
breathing. I do the breathing technique. The Wim Hof is like my favorite thing, because the breath, that is what we are right now. We're in this, like right now, where it's a selfishness, like the universe is taking the breath in, and then when the breath goes back out, that becomes like it's a cycle within a cycle. That's literally what this is, as a consciousness, as an entire species in the entire universe. We're all kind of breathing in, and then we breathe out. I mean, it's hard to fathom, but it's really what's happening, because the universe is a living being.
When we you don't have to sit in the lotus posture, but we're able to keep our spine straight. We know how to breathe. There's a certain way of holding your mouth in your jaw and your throat that opens up a doorway that allows the life force when you breathe a certain way to move up in the spine past the chakras. As this happens, you draw away from the exterior phenomena that you're pulling you outward all the time to the sacred centers. And as you do this consistently, you create a magnet that creates this momentum. And gradually, as you reverse that magnet, you go further, deeper in, and it works for the precision mathematics. This basic technique was known all over the place. In fact, there's evidence that Christ not only practiced it, but taught it to the apostles. When Paul says, I rejoice in Christ's teachings, I die daily, what he meant was he was able to stop his heart and his lungs daily when he went, because that's the deep state. But the politics, the greed of the Judaic-Christian hierarchy prevented this from continuing to go in the West. Only in the East, where this politics wasn't apparent, with these techniques preserved. And even then, it got messed around, but it was preserved in certain places like the Himalayas. I know the Kung Fu monks, the Shaolin, and the Taoists knew these techniques because I knew my master knew them. It wasn't just handing them out. You had to earn that.
You had to earn it, yeah. And that's how it should be.
Exactly. So I think that's the most essential things, because it takes rhetoric and conversation, goes around and around and around, and it makes it almost unnecessary, superfluous. Because when you get in that holy place, you know what it means. It says, "Be still and know that I am." And it, like I said, it works with precision mathematics. And again, grace comes in because the Creator, the Creator, she sees what we do, knows the motives for what we do, hears everything we say and everything we don't.
Yeah, and Jake had a comment. He says the New Age diminishes the sovereignty of Christ to a mere state of mind rather than the divine sovereign creator. That is one aspect of what New Age, what I'm talking about is it's all a matter of perspective. What some people call New Age really isn't. It's just ancient teachings that
Christ
I
also,
believe.
He also said, "Are you not children of the Most Gods and children of the Most High?" And I think my argument with a lot of Christians, and I don't want to argue with anyone about God, especially, it's like, what do you do? That's who you are. But is that the idea that is apart from what we can be, but we all are heirs to that heritage. Is he the supreme example? Absolutely. Absolutely. But the idea that we're separate from that, we cannot be akin to that when we are from that, is what I find somewhat objectionable, which would be heresy, sacrilege, blasphemy.
And when you said he, she, I know some people will take offense to that. Now, I want to say something about that. I personally believe in the male aspect of God, but
so do I.
But I do believe that there is something else there at play, and a lot of people will call it the demiurge. And the demiurge had a mother, which
duality is what I mean.
It's a duality, yeah. But it is Sophia who is the divine creator, and she actually gave birth to this being.
That's right.
And so the true God would be
Which
his
means wisdom.
Yeah, and a lot of people will line up Yahweh with El, and El would be Sophia's consort, and they had Yahweh, and that he is the demiurge. And now that's what some people believe. Don't come at me and start telling me that I'm worshiping Sophie. So no, I'm telling you that this is what a lot of people believe. The Cathars were murdered by the Jesuits, and because of their belief in what could be, truths that we're being told, hey, do not believe this, do not follow this, mainly because and somebody just said it right here. They said that, and I got to point this out really quickly here. Somebody said that there are no parameters. I forgot, where did they say it at? They said, here it is. Oshia Benny says, I think the dark side of New Age stuff is that it never has any warnings. And when dealing with real stuff, there are always dangers along with advantages. That is the problem, that everybody wants a warning label that says, hey, if you go into a deep meditative state, that it could be caustic. Now, that's the truth, because your body could be assaulted. You could be accosted by demons. your spirit can be taken and trapped, and they can literally wrap your silver cord around you. I'm not even joking, folks. You could get so far into another dimension that you're stuck there for ages. But when you come back, if you're not already put into a mental institution and you're in some sort of coma, it could have been like no time has passed, but yet you were there for eons. Now, there are those, and I'm not even going to get into the sources and start going into all this stuff, that believe that that is what happened to Lucifer, that he fell into the spiral of the abyss, and that these vampiric, and there we go again, these vampiric entities took him and tortured him and cast him back out to fight the one true God. And that is why when he returned, he was rebellious. Now, that also speaks to the fact that God is infinite and can do anything, but he allowed him his say. But what he did was speak out against God. And then there are others who will argue that he was speaking out against the demiurge. But either way, two wrongs don't make a right. The demiurge isn't doing correct, but then you come to earth and create havoc and hell and chaos and raise all kinds of Cain, which is the equivalent of Nazi versus communist. If you go far enough on the wheel, they become the same.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Pardon me for interrupting your flow.
No,
you're mentioning about the silver cord. Well, it's just, you know, I love it. And Christ says, whenever two or more are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them.
Yep, that's right.
And we're talking ideally about the most important thing we got to talk about. And when you talk about the cord and the body being vulnerable, you know, I don't mean this to sound pedantic, but guru means, it means dispeller of darkness. And when we taught to meditate, one of the oldest forms is to picture Christ or picture someone of equal saintly, you know, of course, no one is equal to Christ, but someone of a saintly as a visual aid when you meditate, you picture that.
Yeah.
And as a focal point, as you meditate, as you do your techniques, by virtue of that, you build up a connection that is supposed to protect you. Now, I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. I can't say that. I can only tell you what my experiences have been in meditation. And there's, you know, the astral projection stuff. There's, I know what is peculiar to my journey here, you know, and I think it's fairly pervasive, but I can't say where it is, where it isn't. And that is one thing that's almost an existential law, is that when you are sit to do that discipline, to devote to God as we're supposed to, your idea of God, you do that discipline. Those are your spiritual bookends. First thing you get up, last thing if you go to sleep, you pray, you meditate, and you thank ideally the Creator for having woken you up and having you, and then again for having got to the day, and then you pray for everyone. Yeah, that's what I do anyways.
That's
Pray
what I
for all
do
the
too.
people that I know or don't know, and then I, you know, try and go to deep place and ask for guidance and let it go where it's going to go. And sometimes we have specific needs, and that's another thing. But in that sacred, I guess, arrangement, potential union, there is an implied protection. So I don't know what exceptions are to that. I only know what I know and what I'm sharing with you guys tonight. As I said, I'll be 71, and there were years I left the spiritual path. I fell from grace in more ways than one. I'm lucky to be alive and as sane as I am. But as I remind myself on my grimmest day, I'm still here for a reason.
Oh, yeah.
And so is everyone here. I have to say that I'm very grateful for having been able to come on the show. And I hope that I've been able to justify my appearance here, the audiences, and I can I definitely have a tendency to run on.
No, it's fine. Let me ask you a question, though.
Sure.
When you were talking earlier, you were talking about gargoyle.
The nature spirits.
Yeah, these spirits, and you call
That's
them
what she
nature
called them.
spirits, but did you see these gargoyles?
Oh,
and
they manifested right in front of me, man. She was,
wow.
Her form went from the negative. I mean, like the black with the yellow around it, that dissipated, but not to where I could see her face. It was almost as if there was a doorway, but I didn't see a portal. So don't take me there. All I know, it went from that negative effect to it was like Do you remember when you were really young and the lights are out and you could see all these different colored things in the room in the dark? I did when I was young. All the different prana, you know. Anyway, these
It's funny you use that word prana.
things started to circulate into make a form until it was these creatures, and they were horrific looking. But I was never vaguely disquieted by an image that otherwise would have terrified me and anyone else that had any sense, except for the fact that the woman I was with was such a saintly demeanor. Everyone knew it was around her. She was literally a Madonna-like figure. And so the room was just permeated with the feeling of grace, you know. And when she would do these prayers, they're all different. When she would start, the spontaneity and sincerity created a cosmic link that in turn created a vibration in the room that just saturated that room with peace. And there's no other way to describe. Well, there's better ways to describe it. That's the best way I can. And I felt invulnerable. It was almost like pass the popcorn. You know, I mean, and I don't mean to be trite, but I never felt afraid. And it was amazing to see this. I mean, I had, like I said, I wasn't exactly my first rodeo. I had done a lot of acid. By the time I was 15, 16 years old, I was doing Orange Sunshine and Purple Microdot and Peyote, and you know, I was a trailblazing, mother, and I grew up in a neighborhood where we all kind of were. I was transplanted there. I was about 5 by the time I got there, but everyone, we kind of grew up together. We went through building tree forts, playing army, to playing football, to picking up girls, to tripping and on acid. We went through all the stages together, and so I always felt comfortable when I was tripping with these guys. But we took some heavy stuff, man, But nothing was near as visually compelling as what I saw completely straight in the room with this medium. There he goes. You kidnap aliens again. What's going on there?
No.
And that's a fact, Jack. As far as I saw the nature spirits on several occasions, and they looked like gargoyles, man. They looked demonic, and sometimes they were werewolves. I never heard the dogman until a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's a recent thing that people started using. Let me ask you this: when you saw these beings, Kevin froze up there. Oh wow! We started talking about it, and it freezes up. Well, Kevin, great. Okay, folks. So we were talking about. Let me see if I can take him off and then try to add him back on. Looks like we lost him. Great. Let me try again. Nope. Great. Okay. So, and now he's gone. Maybe he'll come back in. Kevin, if you can hear me, just come back in. Use the link to come back in. 1 second, folks. Give me a second. Man, so this happens sometimes on this show, folks. I'm not even joking. We'll start talking, and if it gets too hot and heavy, something happens. I personally think it could be more than just, it could be of a spiritual nature.
I mean, it could just be his cat running around unplugging something.
Yeah, but even if it was his cat that did it, my point is that something always.
No, I mean it happens always all the time.
Yeah, it keeps happening, and so
certain topics seem to be like taboo or something.
Yep. So, and there are other people that I'd like to talk to and have on and do things with. A few of them, not many, but a handful that have been poisoned by other people in the community because they have a problem with me. which is really sad because you're hurting the whole community by not allowing us to have them, you know, because you've poisoned them. And but that's a sad thing, because you know, you don't realize the damage you're doing, because we are here trying to get all this information together. I will say this. I'm going to take these off until Kevin can come back, if he comes back. He was just about to start talking about the dog man and the gargoyles and all that. It's not uncommon when people have, now, do you remember when Melvin Greathouse was on? This was one of the most important things that was talked about. And Kevin just said the same thing, that when he was a kid, that he would see into the darkness, he would see these faces, beings, whatever you want to call them. And that happens quite often with people who have the eye. He obviously has some sort of bloodline that gives him that ability, and it does run through the blood, right? To find those things and to be. And I think he's no exception to this. Anthony, you got it. Like you were talking one day on the show about how you were babbling on the I can't think, what's it called, the answer machine.
Oh yeah, I was sleepwalking.
Yeah, and so you have these people that can do these things. When I was a child, the same thing as Kevin says, same thing as Melvin Greathouse and a million other guests and people who've given me their encounters. What ends up happening is you close your eyes, and in your mind's eye, you can still see these damn demons and what they are. You know, I could see something in the corner of my room when I lived in that one house I told you about, the reddish brick colored house. It wasn't brick, but there was a pond next to it where we found like a bunch of deceased cats. And there was something really, really wrong with that place. It seemed to affect the women in that house. My aunt was one of the smart ones. My Aunt Rosa, she was like, I'm not doing it. She was the one that was very spiritually in tune. She walked into the house the day before Thanksgiving, and she walked back out, got in her car, and drove off. And everybody's like, where's Aunt Rosa? And then my mom calls her an hour later. She's like, I'm in Taylor at home. I'm not going to be in that house. Are you kidding me?
She loved the X-Files.
Oh, yeah. And then Thea Hoffa was like, I'll be here until we're done eating, and then I'm leaving. Not the least of which because a shower curtain wrapped around her. So that house, it had a lot of weird energy, a lot of weird things. And I'm going to tell you this, that there's a lot that can be looked at as, like, you know, through the bloodline. There's a lot of things that go through your bloodline. Look up ancestral memory. That's one thing that people have. It was interesting. Somebody had said something about the I forgot what they're called now. The Mungelians or the how do you Melungeon. Golly, I can't even think right now. The Melungeons of the Appalachians. They're an interesting people, and of course people say, well, they're African American, they're native, they're this or that. Now they've done DNA tests, and they have very little of that. They have Mediterranean bloodline. Think about that, folks. They're actually, a lot of them are Middle Eastern. So you're going like, how did these Middle Eastern people end up in the middle of the Appalachians? Well, we're going to have a guest on, and I don't know if it's next week or the week after. I got to look at the calendar. But we're going to ask him that question because he's studied some of this stuff, and one of his theories, I think, holds water. I really believe this, that when and it's another interesting thing about that Patel, you know, when we were talking about that earlier, the Anunnaki were called the Patel, right? And so that's another, they were called, the Anunnaki were called that by the people from India. And that is actually a last name that's very common with people from India. So I think it's very interesting when you start to get into the whole whatever, and then the Melungeons, you know, it's so bizarre because they've done a lot of DNA testing on the Melungeons, and they found that their closest relatives are Saharan Africans. I don't mean Africans as in slave Africans. I mean as in Berber, Bedouin. actual Carthaginian, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Phoenician and that type of people, that's who their relatives, their closest relatives, the DNA, it doesn't lie. It tells you what they are. And so when you see that, Kevin's back. We're going to bring him back on.
Okay, good.
But when you see that bloodline, guess what? Elvis was one. So was Babe Ruth. Take a look at those.
Wasn't Abraham Lincoln one?
Abraham Lincoln. And they're very intelligent. And get this, they're very, very good at math. A lot of them have a very high IQ, and they're very good at math. Now, some of these people, they grew up in the Appalachians. They couldn't read or write to save their lives, but they could count.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who's really good at math? Semitic people. I know when people say Semite, you think of Jewish people, but they're actually the least Semitic. Okay. And I'm not even joking. But there's just it's very interesting. I mean, you could go on and on.
I mean, they invented math, so
Arabic numerals, Not to mention an amazing pizza oven. But anyway, let's bring Kevin back on. Kevin, so you got abducted by aliens. How was it? What happened? Did they probe you?
let us know.
Well, it's just say it's hard to sit down.
He's like, but I can't move much. I'm just going to stay here with my Aspercream. No, but so Kevin, you were in the middle of before the powers that be struck and said, "Nah, we don't like what you're saying."
Yeah, that's probably getting to the heart of things. When you start talking about divine connections, people don't want us to really be unified. They want us to be at each other's throats and divided, and where we're easy to because they don't want us to see the show game they're playing constantly.
Mm-hmm. When everybody's fighting, that's the easiest way to control.
Oh, they love us. They love it when we fight. It's just it's our challenge, and that the ego is the biggest thing. Getting back to that, but yeah, I was talking about meditation, the sacred connection between the breath, the chakras, the third eye, and grace of the Creator, because having a spine makes us different, and the chakras. I was raised Irish Catholic, man. When I asked my mother about the wee folk, I said, "Why didn't you tell me about this all this time, Mom? Why didn't you tell me about this experience off the bus where you stepped in?" She said, "Because I wanted to be a good Irish Catholic boy." And that sums up a lot of what I was dealing with growing up. But being like so many, an old soul, I needed more than the catechism that I was working with when I first, was presented, the metaphysic of my mother's, God bless her, her faith kept her strong right to the end, through Alzheimer's and through a lot of things. But we're children of the Most High indeed, and everything. It's funny, you hear those koans, the Zen koan, Koan, those riddles, Master, what is enlightenment? That tree. Master, what is enlightenment? That frog. Like, what? Well, I think we know that when we get to a certain place, anything in creation viewed in a certain perspective gives us a glimpse into infinity and our own relationship to it. That's what that means.
Yeah.
So we are gods and children of the Most High, but we've lost our sacred, the knowledge that gives us,
and that to me is the most egregious.
It is.
I mean, that we have lost our ability, because Christ says, "Strive to be like me." And when he says that, he's not just talking about, well, just be moral. And that is the problem, that they've cut it all out and said that, well, he said this, but not this. Let's just change it into a metaphor. And when he told these stories and these parables, let's just change it all around and do. No, dude. When he says to be like me, he gives you the ability to heal. If you put your hands, I'm not even joking, folks. I've done this before.
The life force can do anything.
Yes, exactly. You can put your hands on somebody in white light, and
what? When Master told me,
he said
when they were learning Kung Fu when he was a kid, he said we couldn't learn anything until we could hold the Ma Bu stance for an hour. But I came to the West and I realized that Americans weren't ready for that. But most importantly, we weren't allowed to learn anything martial until we learned about healing. We knew about healing herbs. We learned about things that would strengthen, like ginseng, dong quai, futi tea. We had to learn that and know it before we learned any of the ways to destroy or to hurt. And that made a big impression on me, even though I was very young when I started with him. I was lucky. I was guided by some inner angels kept me alive, and I knew that I was in the presence of the real deal. And I was around a lot of when that thing started to unfold. When Bruce Lee I saw Enter the Dragon on the big screen. You know, it was really impressive. You know, and in those days, it was so unlike anything I had ever seen. But the world in which it thrust me in, all the different forms, the styles of Kung Fu, the difference between Shaolin and Taoist, and how the internal versus the external, the animal forms, it was a whole universe, man. You know, and I remember walking 7 miles in a snowstorm to get to class. That's how dedicated I was. But I remember Master saying, nothing is more important than your spiritual balance. And in this world, he says, he likened it to walking through like a, what do they call malls these days? They're kind of vanishing now, but where you have to go through all these different doors just to get to where you want to go. You have to all these distractions, basically.
There's all these side quests.
He was a simple man. He lived in a room the size of your bathroom. He had one business suit. And he had a couple different workout outfits, and he had a little box under his cot. And I kid you not. And I saw that when I went, because I was the only one in class that day. He said, good to be devoted, but must have common sense. No cross today. And he was walking around with a bowl of pig ear soup. I'll never forget. And I was able to watch him work out, which he hardly ever let us do. As you know, or don't know, they're the communists. A lot of the masters left during the communist, the Cultural Revolution, and they had torn down so many things. The angry young students, before they realized they were killing their own culture.
They were.
I think it was Joe and Lai finally.
I think communism has been the biggest disease that's ever hit the earth. Everybody always brings up the Nazis, but if they really compared them side by side,
well, they were able to reel in before they had lost him. By that time, but they come to their sense that a lot of the masses have been lost to the West and other parts of the world. But what they retained was what they call wushu. And a lot of people don't know, Kung Fu is really a misnomer. It really means just to be good at something. It really literally means man work over time. Mm-hmm. A poet, a musician, to be master, a butcher, who never hits the bone. This is Kung Fu, but Wushu denotes the martial aspect. But when we were first being exposed to it, was mostly through the movies, the guys that survived the Cultural Revolution ended up in Hong Kong, which is British colony. So this is what we're really exposed to, mostly Southern Kung Fu artists, as opposed to Northern. And so what we're exposed to was, was through that medium, and that's why we got what we got. And Bruce Lee, all the stuff he learned was Southern, for instance, Wing Chun, Hung Gar.
So does anybody in the audience want to ask questions? Because the last question I have for you.
I'm sorry, I haven't even hit the chat window. I want anyone to think I've been ignoring them, man.
No. You're just talking. But when you were younger and you saw these creatures, what did the werewolf thing look like? Tell me that, because that's sort of my wheelhouse, and I'd really like to know.
God, I'm sorry. I really want to deeply apologize. I didn't even have the chat window open.
Forgive me. Ignore all these people. They're useless peasants. Look, like I was saying, I'm joking.
Your audience is everything.
They're everything. Dude, they are not peasants.
It looked horrific, man. And it looked like the ones that I remember like it was yesterday. They were you wouldn't forget that. Trust me. Mm-hmm. On your show and other shows, there's different varieties of dog, man. What I saw was a quintessential long wolf-like muzzle. Oh man, it was horrific. It was horrific, and it was huge. And it was only like 5 feet separating me from Meredith. She was sitting at a 45-degree angle from me, and where the material manifest was right in between us, man. It was like right over top of me, practically. But actually, no, it was a little off too. It wasn't really over top of me. It was right kind of in front of me, but not looming over me, but pretty fucking. I could have reached out, if I had the presence of mind to do it, which I did not. Amazing. I'll never forget it. I mean, I couldn't believe. And I asked her, I said, what do the colors mean? The colors of light sweeping through the room. She said, well, colors like numbers mean things.
Very important.
And different shades of colors mean things. I tell you.
Did she tell you about the red?
She told me, basically was teaching me quantum physics, only that's not what they called it back then. She said, everything is energy and consciousness, Kevin. And it says, and matter is solidified, versions of that. And you have to understand that there's the power. It's how you use it that determines what is good and evil, but the power is the power. And I remember my quaint notions of good and evil at the time, were at war with some of the things he was trying to get me to understand.
Yeah.
This Madonna-like creature who, just emitted, such a beautiful,
energy,
vibe.
aura. And when you witness these things, and folks, I'm going to give you a little teaser about what's coming up on Tuesday. We were going to do an episode about another one about vampires, but then I thought, well, we've kind of saturated it because we have so many. We were like, let's just take a break from it. So I have a friend. His name is Quan, and he reached out to me, and he said he's been listening to the show off and on for a while when he has time, but he spent a lot of time in China because he's from there. But he says, look, I can tell you about this Yan Jing. And I've been saving this one for a while, and I think I'm going to just say it because he literally was almost killed by these reptilian creatures that look like standing dragon-looking beings. And one of the things that he did pretty regularly, because he was with monks that helped, that basically saved his life, because they're living in what they call the forbidden zone in China. Yeah. And these monks, they were Shaolin, and they were Taoist. And so, there's Taoist, those are different things, whatever. He was Taoist, actually. They were Shaolin monks, and they told him, I'm like, don't you understand like how this works? And he has since converted to Christianity, but one of the monks actually did something that was kind of interesting. He called upon the name of Christ. Not really knowing, because this monk had lived in a monastery up in the mountains of the Dragon's Spine. He had never, and we'll talk about this on the show, but he's never been exposed to Christianity ever, because communism destroyed every aspect of Buddhism, every aspect of Christianity, every aspect of Islam. They destroyed it. They don't want any spirituality. It's only the state. State is their God, right? So this guy, he actually, during a high, what they call a high state of meditation, he actually called upon the name of Christ to stop these creatures from attacking them. What's really interesting, though, is where they're at in that spot. It looks like the spine of a long dead dragon that has it's like 80 feet long. It's unbelievable how big this thing was. That section they were in.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And he was part of a crew that was to go in there initially and take these monks out, because he worked for the military, but he was what would be considered like a contractor, right? And so he had gone out of the military and he went back in to make money as a soldier of fortune. And so their job was to extract these monks. And then in turn, the monks ended up helping them. And without their help, and without the one in particular who meditated and found Christ through meditation, he had no way of knowing who Jesus was. He had been born and raised in this temple. And so we're going to talk about that probably maybe on the Tuesday episode. But it's interesting, though, because these beings, like one of the things when they meditated, he's like they were attacked by these what looked like werewolves. They didn't have legs. They just had like this smoke tail looking thing. And I told him, I said that when he described it, it is a demon called Amun. And that, if you look at Amun, you look him up, he's got a wolf's head and he's got a snake body. And these things were being cast at them by this one in particular reptilian creature. It's a very, very interesting story, and it's something that was told to me. He was referred to me by another friend of mine from Hong Kong, and that's where he now resides, is Hong Kong. But yeah, it's a very interesting place. And it's in like Western China, and which people don't realize that like 70%, I think it's like 72% or something like that of the country lives in the East.
Yeah.
It's unpopulated in the West.
Yeah,
And
the
that's
West is rugged and wild.
rugged, yeah. And the government keeps it closed off because there's a lot of unstable phenomena running around.
We got a lot of critters here too.
Yeah. If they see these things, they might go back and tell people, hey, there's more than what these people are telling us. You know, there's a whole nother, but it's a very interesting story. And I thought, you know, this is when you go into that heightened state of meditation, you could get something good, you could get something bad, you don't really know. And it doesn't surprise me that you saw this werewolf looking thing and these gargoyles.
But I wasn't in a heightened state of meditation, brother. I was just witnessing.
She was though.
She
right?
was. He was channeling. Yeah, but I've never been.
It doesn't matter if you're within the proximity of her aura, and she's a very powerful adept. You will see what she
Yeah,
sees. Because I talked about this with Ron Moorhead yesterday.
I just want to be clear that anytime I was in a profound state of meditation, irrespective of her and my own, I never had experienced anything but a beautiful, serene, spiritual vibe. That doesn't mean, I mean, a lot of my meditations were, I was frustrating. I couldn't want to get deep. I can't, but at least you feel better because you did it, because you know you put that time in every day. But I never had a meditation where I felt anything evil ever. When I don't believe it's possible to invoke the names of true adepts and still be, I mean, it's possible, but it's the percentages are, you know,
You
there's
have
a
to go
reason.
into it with an extreme lack of faith.
And also for just the, I just want to make a distinction between Shaolin and Taoist. You're talking about Taoist. Taoist is in keeping with the I Ching, and that's Bagua, Xingyi, and Tai Chi, which is the oldest of all the martial art forms. And
he was
forms.
He was Taoist by birth. The Shaolin were not.
Shaolin is Buddhist, and that came from India. That's the animal forms.
Yeah, people don't realize that what started in India actually spread throughout the Far East.
That's right. Well, the Emperor of China wanted to know about Buddhism. So they sent this guy they compared his pallor to chocolate, very dark-skinned Indian, and he came and he showed them the what they call the 18 heavenly movements, but that really is 18 different animal styles, because the masters, and in discovering, not only did our monkey mind have to be harnessed with the body, but by observing nature, how many times in different ways have we wanted to connect the infinite through nature, different cultures, different shaman, different. So you have the original 5 form fist, which is the dragon, snake, leopard, crane, and tiger. And you have monkey, praying mantis, an eagle, and that's the Shaolin. That's Buddhist, and that comes from the Himalayas.
Yeah, and Kenpo, and I took Kenpo for several years, and you have the white tiger, and
that's the most Chinese of all karate
forms. That is, and they took the 2 most potent of those 5 and turned it into it's just a weaponized form of rapid hand strikes and going for pressure points and taking out somebody really quickly. That is, and then the Japanese took it, and it's called Kempo, which is a sort of a watered down version of it, mixed with karate. Now, karate is Japanese. That is not Chinese.
And Korean.
People don't. And Korean, yes, and Korean.
The Tang Sudo and Taekwondo and Aikido are the Korean ones.
We could talk about martial arts. I could sit here and talk about Wing Chun and Aikido. I was explaining somebody the other day about the difference between Aikido and Hapkido, and they were just like, I was
big
trying
difference.
to tell, it's a big difference. And
what really captivated me with the forms was watching people do the forms. They were so beautiful to watch, and you had to be such shape and to do them correctly. They were so beautiful. I've never seen anything like it. And I realized that it utilized everything. You'd have to do a separate exercise for your calves, another one for your stomach, another for your butt. Everything was used in unison, synchronized at once when you did those forms. And that was quite a revelation for me. I was a good athlete at the time. Within 6 months of formal study with Master Wong, I was 40% better. I could touch the rim in a basketball court when I was 14. I was a natural leaper. But after 6 months with that guy, because one of the first things we learned in those days, stretching wasn't as valued as it is. People take it for granted now, the importance of it. In those days, they didn't know so much about it. And Master used to say, don't jog. Your knees and ankles will be worn out before you're 30.
Yeah.
Do your forms.
It's actually not good to run, folks. I'm going to tell you right now, and it will also enlarge your heart. There's a lot of things you shouldn't do. Walking is much better. Believe me.
Well, Master I've seen him do things that we haven't had a chance to get to that. His manipulation of the life force. But these men, they live in humble obscurity. They don't do Oprah talk shows, not the real ones.
Yeah.
They don't care about that nonsense.
No,
Yogananda used to say, I could get lots of followers by
more
doing
into spirit than they are in the flesh, and they're already like halfway there, if not more.
Yogananda used to say I could attract so many more followers by producing miracles in front of people, but I refuse. I want sincere seekers, people who love God, who love their fellow man, want to be of service to this world. It kind of separates the men from the boys, existentially speaking. It's easy. It's natural to be attracted to things for sensationalist reason. As much of a child as anyone at just 70. But I think you hit the nail on the metaphysical head when you said that. I really hope that this has been a very good experience for me. I want to thank you all I have so much more to share. I don't know what your time is like.
Well, we're at the 3-hour mark, so we would have to, but you're always welcome to come back. We can bring you back on another night and we could talk some more. And, or maybe we could record, because you reach a totally different audience when you record. That's like I told Ron Moorhead. I mean, you'll reach the YouTube audience, but
I usually follow you on YouTube. Can I find this on YouTube after this is over?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You'll see us.
That's why I do all your shows, because I'm almost always doing something when you're live. And I really wish that I have to put so much time in every day to practice the guitar, to stay in shape, to meditate. And it's hardly there, but there are a lot of more and more I'm able to catch your live events. And it's a great program. You guys should be very proud. The variety of things that you're able to draw on, as I said, and weave into a seamless existential tapestry is enviable and educational. I think anyone could overstate the importance of it in today's world, because Pandora's box has definitely been opened. And like you said not long ago, folks, I hate to tell you, but vampires, werewolves, magicians, black art, witches, that all exists.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
And people don't realize too that they do black arts and black magic even unwittingly.
Sure.
Cursing people and
but thinking bad thoughts. Our thoughts are things.
Not to forgive and choosing to not pray for people and to be wicked, and just in general, you got to do it. You got to pray for your enemies, folks. I'm telling you, I do it all the time. It's something I enjoy. But if God can turn the heart of one of your enemies, that's just one less problem for you. And that person is being helped. You're helping to save that person. And maybe one day in the afterlife, they'll be like, hey, thank you. And more reward for you if that's what you're looking for. For me personally, I'm not trying to get to heaven, and I'm not trying to avoid hell. I'm just trying to do what's right. And wherever that takes me, I trust in God that it's going to take me where I need to be.
In this warrior ethos culture that we're in, and America stands for so many wonderful things. We're still like a child walking, staggering on. We don't have the maturity of a lot of our other countries, but we have a boldness and a spirit that is enviable by any standards. But in this warrior ethos kind of culture, I'm reminded continually, a samurai are kind of quintessential example of that spirit. But a lot of people don't even know what that means. Samurai means to serve.
To serve, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what this is. Actually, it's a samurai. It's got a skull on it, but it's a samurai. Yeah. But so we're gonna run, Kevin. It's
Okay.
great having you on, man. And
It
we
was
had
an
a
honor and a
great
privilege.
time. And it was our honor to have you on and to talk about so many different subjects. You've lived a very colorful life, and so I would like to record with you because you'll reach the other audience, that just refuses to come to the tube of you. They're like, no, we shall stay on thou Spotify and Apple and whatever else. But we can
Anything I can do to
record it.
help.
Yeah, and we can put that out there. And if people want to go and listen to it here again, they can listen, however they want to do it. But there'll always be some stuff that you won't get, that you'll pick up the next time. And I encourage people to do this. And this isn't for views or likes or whatever, I would say every episode you can of PRT, you should listen to it at least twice. Because everybody always says that there's stuff that they missed the first time.
I'm constantly going back over things. Yeah. There's so much. There's a lot of, it's really, what you guys are doing is incredible. It really is. It's very important. And sometimes I get frustrated and angry. It's like, come on, stay on point. Because you start talking about politics and you go, well, who am I to tell you what to do? It's your show. That just be selfish. But
what I did the other night, Kevin, I did 2 hours. I did the show, and then I went on an hour-long rant about the crap that people.
Well, that's better than starting off with a 45-minute rant and then when's you going to get to where we're?
Yeah, see that there. I've been working on that. I got some life coaches trying to tell me not to do that.
You've done a great job. All of you should be proud. And I thank you again for having me. I hope that. Hopefully,
I'll do it right now. I'll wait till the end, and then if you
I'm not criticizing. I don't mean to be criticism.
No. It's if you're a listener to the show, and you're putting your time into this, it's basically time is money. Time is value.
I think the thing that I want to stress more than anything, brother, and yeah, you're right. Time is money. Is that I hate to see anybody bogged down, defending themselves, giving energy to people who are attacking, because it's so injurious to you, and it's so hard. It's easy to say what you should do, when you're sitting in the armchair. Quarterback was always the easiest position I remember, but it's hard because you're sensitive, and none of us are perfect, man. Our ego is always tripping over our egos, but you guys are doing a great job, and at the risk of sounding redundant, thank you again for having me. I want to thank the audience for their support of this show, and I hope I said something that resonated with someone tonight. If I have, then it hasn't been for naught.
Yeah, it's been great, and I enjoyed it. And there is something to be said, and I've always been a little bit jealous that I can't play instruments, but of course my fingers have always been broken.
You don't know what you can't do.
Well, Kevin, I'll say this. I've given it the old college try about a dozen times, and my brother's like, be like water.
I knew of a guy that didn't start playing an instrument until he was 40.
Well, I'm 49, and I've tried, and my brother's tried to teach me. And
there's no blueprint for this, man. Just, who knows what way that it'll work through you when it finally manifests. But you were given a lot at birth, man, But I know what you mean. I envy the guys that are, I wish I was better.
I look up to my older brother
to be good at,
to play guitar, because I think he's one of the best guitarists I've ever heard.
Who's that?
My brother. King Dibbles here with the laughy faces. He was like, I'm trying to teach you how to be musical, but you're too swift.
Well, let me say this about
been that. Trying to catch you, and you're too swift. You run too fast away.
In case anyone goes scurrying to I can't find this Kevin Murphy guy. You're not going to find me. I worked under the name of Juke Joint Jokers, and even then, I haven't uploaded the videos. I've got a website which has got some cool sound bites, but most of the stuff I haven't taken the time to get it out there. But I've got piles of it, man, and I'm going to start doing it because my friends are driving me nuts. Murphy, how many years have you been doing this? I can hardly find you. Got a handful of bootleg cassette, and I'm tired of listening to it because I do have some incredible stuff. I played, on the road with a lot of heavy guys. Did gigs with Tito Puente. Did gigs with Bobby Parker, and even rock and roll guys like Eddie Money. And I never really cared about whether I was noted or famed. You want to be respected by people you respect, and you want to be able to pay your bills and justify what to many people is a self-indulgent, frivolous lifestyle. But I did the best I could, fellas, and but I'm going to be, if in case anyone was wondering, the Juke Joint Jokers website's got some killer stuff on it, studio and live, and I will be uploading some video. Kevin, we want to see what we're hearing. I know, I'll get there. So thanks for letting me say that, because I needed to say that.
All right, Kevin. Well, it's been a pleasure, and long time listener of the show. I appreciate you coming on and talking.
Absolutely. God bless you all. Creator, guide, and heal all of you in every struggle that you're going through. And I hope that you find peace, every one of you, in purpose.
Yeah.
In this life.
That's awesome. All right,
Thank you for
Kevin,
that.
we're going to run. I'll see you.
Good night, man. And I guess, can I just talk to you on Facebook? I gave you my cell, so I don't have yours, but let's talk tomorrow if you're around, if you have any time, just
Actually Saturday, I don't know. I don't think I'm working on my taxes. That's about it. But I could take some time, and
well, it doesn't have to be. So we'll just play phone tag too. What's a good time? I got those books coming your way, so keep your third eye open for that in the mail.
Yeah, and I had no idea that you were the one that sent me that book about the Native Americans.
That's me. Well,
yeah,
you were talking so passionately about it, and I thought, he's on the right track. He's pulling into the station. There's a few things I wanted to give you so you would have a more complete.
Counting Coup. Pretty good.
Cutting
book,
Horses.
Cutting Horses. Yeah, it's a good book. All right, guys. I'll see you. And
thanks again.
God bless. Kevin, great guy, man. Nice guy. Glad we got him back from the Pleiadians.
Mm-hmm.
They took him for a ride or whatever. But folks, and it's we got 300 people in here tonight, but we're going to get the replay on the shows is awesome. And now we are really moving. There was a mistake that we were making on all of our videos. I'm not going to say what it was, because I'm only going to give this to the people who I really think deserve it. Okay, the information. But you can make that mistake, and it will stagnate your growth. And I can't tell you, the people that run the Tube of You, they could have told us this at any time. So if you don't think that, when people are mass reporting you and constantly doing what they're doing, you think it doesn't mess with you, it does. Because it was really jacking with us, the mass complaints. And so it was like, every other week, they're like, we've manually reviewed your video. We'll let it go. We'll let it be. And we're like, thanks. We didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I might have said the word shit. But these people are so crazy that they take the time to sit there and cut that little piece out. Here's where he said the word shit. And then they throw it in there, and then you're in trouble because you said poo poo, whatever. And it's like, what is wrong with these people? Like you like, literally, if I have that much time, do you know what I'm going to do? Something very constructive. I got a lot of fences that need mending at my ranch. Do you have all this time? I'm going to make you an offer to you people who don't work and you're young, able-bodied, and all you want to do is just be a menace. Go work out there at my ranch. I'll pay you to mend the fences. How about that? So my cattle don't get out. You want to do that? And we got some sheep pens we got to build too. But don't touch the sheep inappropriately, because I know that's what some of y'all, people from Oklahoma, just not all people from Oklahoma, just a certain Shawnee Bean clan that does. They'll it's not a youngin, but I'll take it. It's a sheep. I'll take it.
Sure is pretty.
That's very pretty. So you never know what kind of weirdo-ness is going on with these people. You know what I mean? And I wish more people could be like Kevin or Ron Moorhead or the other great guests we've had, like Melvin Greathouse. We've had some really good people. We were going to have Christopher Jordan, and I'm actually glad that Christopher couldn't make it. Well, he could, but he was only going to be able to do an hour, and he has to get up at he's asleep right now. Let me tell you, he's going to be at the airport by 4:30, so he can leave by 5:45, whatever time it is. So I told him, I said, why don't we just move you, and that gave me the opportunity to bring Casey Murphy. And so I was just like, I'd love to have Kevin come on, and it'd be awesome, because I've been wanting to hit. I've heard, and I only got to hear bits and pieces of his stuff. Over at Jason Bland, I saw like 20 minutes of it, and then I saw 20 minutes on Monica's, and I just was, because y'all know, I don't get to watch.
Yeah.
We tried to watch Nosferatu. I watched an hour and fell asleep. But I had the replay, and Nellie was like, she's like, okay, you're awake, watch this, and I finished it. I gotta say, it was a little too Dracula-y.
Yeah, it was very similar.
It was just like, I am this guy who talks like this. I need to go to live in this other country because mine sucks. And I like this lady there, nice lady. You can't find another nice lady where you're at. And I got to say, the actress that he's all head over heels for, well, what do you expect from an undead parasite? I mean,
Bad taste.
he's got bad taste. She is not pretty. And maybe she's a really nice person and has a beautiful soul. I don't know. But aesthetically, superficial part of me is like, I don't think I'd
He
sink
could have her.
Yeah, he can have her, man. I wouldn't sink my fangs into that. And then in the end, she's like, spoiler alert, she dies. I just told everybody. Now you know. You don't need to go watch it. It's just Count Orloff. There were so many campy cliches. It was just, he's standing there foreboding and creepy. He's got a couple wolves that are hanging out with him. Well, I used to have a couple big dogs that trolled me around too. That didn't, but I was creepy and weird. All right. To my enemies, to my friends, it was just wolf, I just thought it wasn't my thing. I didn't really. And the wolf man, oh my gosh. What do these people have against making these creatures look like how they really look?
Oh, that movie sucked.
Why do you got to look like somebody that's just from a homeless camp here in downtown Austin? I could have found somebody that looked just like that, and I could have made a documentary just videoing this person going through their day-to-day life. And
it was just a dude on bath salts.
I mean, yeah.
That's pretty much it.
He was just on some zombie. That's all it was.
Galaxy gas.
And then at the end, when they showed Orloff laying there, he was like this shriveled up, like skeleton with no butt. It was so bizarre.
Yeah.
What was that? I mean, he had no butt cheeks. It was like he was just.
That was hot. I don't know what you're talking about.
It was so weird, dude. Well, you would think that. I mean, I don't know what you're doing.
That's my type right there.
I'm just sitting there going like. Oh wait. So I'm just sitting there going like, what is this? And so yeah, if you had any inkling to go watch that movie, please just don't. I mean, I don't know. It just did not. It wasn't for me, But to each his own. Maybe you'll like it. I don't know. And I told you what happened, so and I'm telling you that not to be mean, but because I don't want you to go waste your time. You could, and also I think a lot of times too, what they're doing in these movies and stuff too is trying to throw you off from what's really happening. So right now I'm very skeptical of any of this crap because they're kind of giving you like what do you call that? Like, how we were talking about it, like it's soft disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
They're giving it to you, but then they're also leaving
room for this plausible deniability.
Yes,
basically,
and I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
So probably tomorrow night we'll record and do the episode about the Jianjing. Interesting story, to say the least, and it is one of those epic ones. I'd say the Camazotz shows, we're going to do that one. We're going to do that one. And then the Vampires of Mexico. We haven't done it. We haven't done it yet. Because there's one more person I'd like to talk to that has some pertinent information about that. And so, You know, there's a lot that we got loaded up, ready to go. Tomorrow night, we're not planning on being on. We don't have anything planned, but you never know. Now that the weather's warming up, we're going to start doing some investigations and going out to the field, because I think we've stumbled upon a place where there's habitation. If you don't believe me, now I'm going to say this. When you make the video, Anthony,
Uh-huh.
with the night vision camera,
Mhm.
you will be able to see a lot better, because when you're just walking around, I'm at the flashlight. Take a look at this, folks, with the flashlight. I know it's kind of
Yeah,
hard.
on the phone camera's not great.
Mhm. Oh, and then here's another one. There's a little tidbit here. And if you're a Patreon member, you're going to get a lot of this information first on the next Patreon meeting. Is it this coming Monday?
Yeah.
Because we didn't do it last Monday, right?
Nope.
So we have a Patreon meeting, folks, and I'm going to unveil what some of the new episodes are, and I'm going to let you choose what you want to hear, because we have a guy who claims that he only goes by the name of Clyde. His last name, I can't find anything on him, so I don't think his last name is legit. And then when I questioned him, he didn't answer me. So I think he's using a fake name. But this person claims that he was part of the cloning. And like we talked about this on the show, somebody who had, but this person says, I heard you talking about it on the show, and I can tell you this. He's like, me? He goes, and my brother, we are clones, and we were used. This guy says he's a clone. He was a clone, right? And he was giving me all the information about clones and what they do. His brother and him were used. They write code for the simulation that we live in. So he claims. Now, this guy could be cuckoo bananas, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. We don't know, you know what I mean? But the bottom line is, when he was telling me this stuff, like I was just like, okay, just reading it, I thought, I mean, maybe it's bullcrap, maybe it's not, but it's damn interesting. He had my attention.
Yeah.
It's like Dave Chappelle. Got my attention. So because I first started reading it, and he's like, I am a clone, and you're like, oh, okay, let's put that in the pile with the other stuff that people say that's just, I'll take that, the things that are bullshit for 500, Alex, so I thought, and of course I asked him to come on, and it was just like, well, I don't want to show my face because they'll kill me. Who's they? I don't know. The shadow world, government, whatever. But it's interesting. So I thought, I'm not going to deprive my audience of something that may or may not be true. I don't know about any of this. I mean, you don't know. Somebody could come on the show and just say, I hang out with Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama, and not the one now, but the one from 100 years ago. and we go grocery shop. They can say anything. I mean, I don't know what you're doing and what you're not. I mean. So who am I to say, hey, this isn't real, but this person says that they were clones and they were involved in writing code. Now, I did do this. I looked some stuff up, and I found a person from 2000. It was 2016. I found this online. And I'm going to wait till this person comes on before I start dropping links on, because if you go to the Paranormal Roundtable page, I have a page that's manned by me. And I'm going to tell you right now, once again, when you see somebody using the Paranormal Roundtable, whatever, 90% is not me. I go by Josh Turner typically. So it may be me because I use it on occasion, but typically it's one of y'all. And so it's used by several different people, but they're all part of the Paranormal Roundtable family. So this person, I found this, and it says, and it was in 2016, and this person had a blog type thing where they were talking about their day-to-day life as a clone, and they were writing the code that was changing everything and creating the Mandela effect. And so I was like, holy crap, what is this? Somebody says here, James Bartley, and James is going to be coming on the show in April. James Bartley talked about how they could take a sliver of someone's soul, put it in a clone's body, use it for all sorts of evil tasks, like and project. Yes. So, is this real or is this an X? We don't know. Commodore. Is real? No, is this an X? I don't know. I have no idea. Now, this person did say some very interesting things. They said that they have a clone of multiple people. They have cloned a lot of people. And that some of the celebrities and politicians know that they have a clone and they still have the real one there, right? But they also have these clones. So who knows? Okay, who knows? But it is interesting, and I thought maybe this is something that you guys might want to hear. I'm going to let the Patreon people kind of make that decision, what we're going to talk about. And come Monday, we'll have the Patreon show again. We may do a show afterwards, but you're not going to get the full Monty unless you join the Patreon. And it is something that we do for those because we already give away this amazing merch and swag that we give to the people from the Patreon. And if you're a part of the Patreon and you've gotten that swag, it's pretty cool. And it's just something I want to do to give to people that support the show. And I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we do. We give. And so we're going to have that as part of the perk, that you're going to get 2 extra shows a month. And that's going to be something that nobody else really gets. Now, I'm not really on there retelling encounters or whatever because I'm trying to keep most everything behind or away from the paywall. But I wanted to do something for the Patreon. So this is what they get. Right. And of course, it just did not work out today. I had to do an ultrasound of my kidneys because one of my kidneys may be messed up. So please pray for me for that. I'm really sick and tired of having health problems and having just come from nowhere. This stone and then the gout, all this other crap. And I have no doubt that I'm under spiritual attack. So just pray for me, please, that this works out. Because then after that, I have another health issue that I got to get looked at. And hopefully that is all good. I'm going to think positive and think that everything's going to be fine. God will get me through it like always. Yes, Patty, writing code in the Mandela effect. What was that?
What was that?
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
What in the hell? It sounds like a howling wolf or something out there. It wouldn't be the first time we've heard that around here. Well, that's interesting. You see anything? But they come around my place, I kill it. Well, anyways, that was kind of weird and spooky too at the same time. Tony and Anthony are looking. Don't unlock the door, and don't go out there without me. Because if I have to, I can change and become a savage wolf. Let's say that because people believe it. But yeah, so if you're so inclined and you want to be a part of like the Patreon, we are going to put open lines on the Patreon where people can come and they can be a part of the show and jump in there and speak and tell stories. Their stories will be behind the paywall, not mine. So that's the only thing. Other than that, I try not to keep anything I say behind the paywall. But you'll hear it first if you're on the Patreon. So yeah, and if you are a moderator, you're automatically invited too, and you're automatically eligible to get free merch. Another perk of being a mod. So that's what we do. We try to take care of everybody. So tonight, let's take care of some people. People that are still here. Tony, you want to pick somebody who is in green? Somebody
Yeah,
tell me
guys,
that
you guys
wanna
know the
win.
deal. If you guys are in green and you haven't won yet, I know that some
You guys
people were
pick up.
gifted some subs.
Oh, so we already
There
got
it
one.
is. It is what it is.
Mhm.
It says I have never won.
Mm.
So there's how many are we doing?
There's 3 of us. Let's do 3 people.
Well, I choose the first one. It is what it is. That's going to be mine.
Okay.
Okay, so who's the next person who hasn't won anything? Who is a member?
Whose name is in the green?
All right, Jake.
Says,
There we
I ain't
go.
won. You got Jake?
Yeah. I got you, Jake. High five, buddy. Good job.
Getting so much use out of those little,
Small
little
five.
dudes. The Tony spits on his finger because it matches his arms. Hey, but you know what though? I'm not going to talk trash because today Tony did something that he's done it 3 times in the last week. He went to the gym and he worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I went in there. I busted.
I'm good for the year, I think.
What I like about being big in the gym too is when I'm in there lifting, other people are watching to see what I do, and then I'll see them go and try to start doing it. So I'll do stupid shit that don't even like. I'll just start going like with the weight, and then turning this way and going like this, and then people watch me and they're like, "That guy's arms and chest are huge." If I do that, that's, and then you'll see people at least kind of attempting to see, you know. Because and I still get people come up to me and they're like, "What do I do?" You know, because there's one guy next to me today. He was impressed with the weight that I was throwing up, and I did like it was 225 on shoulder press, and I was doing 2 sets of 30. And he's like, "I thought that was pretty impressive that you just started warming up with that." And I said, "I just did. That's what I do. That's my weight. It's 2 plates on the shoulder press, which is not easy to do unless you're me." So somebody said that about the tree branch yesterday. It's like, "Oh, it was dead wood and they're doing all that." Dude, I nearly gashed my hand open trying to yank on that tree branch. I promise you wouldn't have been able to grab that tree branch and yank it down. Okay. But when you have the strength of multiple people, you can do that. So all you got to do is go get bit by a werewolf and then you'll be fine. You can do the things that I do. Folks, Cryptid Commission says they're going to go say wolf's a shapeshifter. Well, one of them already did. He called my mortgage broker. He went to several people that we worked with, and he told my business partner to be careful for me because I'm not only a reptilian, but I can change into a savage werewolf. No bullcrap. This guy did this. He really did this. So when you're that kind of, you got that kind of crazy going on. Cryptid Commission says gym culture is weird. It can be. It can be weird. Yeah, Lucas says 225 on shoulder is impressive. Yeah, and I did 2 sets of 30 on that. And I could have done more, but I needed to hit other points like the backs of my shoulder and things like that. But yeah, that is quite a bit of weight. And the guy next to me turned out to be a fighter, and we knew, like, and Tony and Andy, I'll talk to him. Like he knew everybody we knew. Like it was crazy.
Trauma.
Yeah, he knew Trauma. He knew Cobra. He knew everybody. He's better says that I worked out to Gangnam Style. All right, folks. So we got another person to pick here. Who do we have?
Who wins?
Oh yeah, who was the third person who spoke up?
Yeah, exactly. Cryptid Commission. I told him if I'm a werewolf, I don't need to be a reptilian. You don't need to be or vice versa. You don't need one or the other. You just pick one and you got those. You don't, I'm a reptilian, vampire, Bigfoot, Mothman, werewolf. Whatever. Yeah, and the sad thing about that is he's a former law enforcement officer, right? Who claims he works on roofs now. I don't know. This guy's retarded. Yeah, exactly. A wolf reptoid. Butterfly presses ain't no joke, Jake. I'm telling you that. All right, so somebody in green, just say hey, and we'll send you something. Otherwise, I'm going to jump off of here because somebody in green just tell me, hey, I want some stuff. And it was spooky last night, and those trees were healthy. Yes, the reason that there were no leaves and they looked dead is because it's wintertime. It's like, hello, That's why we went out there so you could see, you know. And did you see the big hog that was killed? I don't know. So people are telling me that they've won, but they're not. Nobody's telling me that they haven't won. And Andres Carrizales says, "Hey,
What's going on?
exactly. Cryptic Commission's got. He's saying all the smart stuff. That he's yes, spring's not until March 21st. It's exactly right. I always thought it was so weird that they run down there to the beach in 40-degree weather. It'll literally be like 48 degrees, and they'll be out there like, I'm so happy to be on the beach. That's spring break. And you're like, wow, you're out there, and it's like not even 50 degrees, and you're running around in bikinis. And cold ass, you know, and it'll be raining and wet and cold, and they're still out there getting sick. It's just stupid. I never went to spring break. Of course, I never could. I was always working. My friends are always like, you're going to spring break, bro. And I'm like, have fun. I have to work 2 jobs. Nice to have mommy and daddy that takes care of you. That's great. Awesome. Have fun. Yes, we will have cameras. We'll be taking cameras out there and see if we can catch anything. All right, man. So I guess nobody wants to win. So I'm going to bail then, guys. We got 2 people that won. Nobody's saying that they want to win. So I guess that's...
Well, Jamie Johnson wants to win, but he said that he's won already.
He just won recently, too.
Yeah.
Dawn of a New Day says, want to win. Finally, somebody says they want to win. Okay, so then you won. Okay, it's that simple. I don't care if you won before. Your name is in green. I pick you. Cool. So send me your information. Tell them what they have to do. Go through the spiel.
So if you won tonight, we have a new email address for you to send your information to. Make sure you send an email with your name, your YouTube handle, and your mailing address and your shirt size to giveaways@prtpodcast.com. So it used to be Josh Turner at PRT Podcast, but specifically for giveaways, send the email to giveaways@prtpodcast.com with that information on it.
This is a good point that Machinery put on there. If you haven't seen, last night we dropped two things. We did one with Ron Moorhead. Go check that out. That's a good episode. Go check it out. And then go check out our impromptu live that we were on location out in the woods. Wasn't planned, but that's a good point. And somebody else said that too. They not only did someone say it, I think during the live, but I got a message today saying that they asking me about that buck that had one antler, that the other one had been torn off its head. And Elastic Machinery says, Wolf, that buck had one antler, maybe got away from what killed the hog. Yeah. Interesting that hog, where that hog was found unalived, right there where I can tell you there is habitation. That was habitation at some point. Because those, you look at the way that they bent those things, like those branches, those trees, they bent them into like a you would have to have hands to do that. And I don't know any human that's doing that. So I don't know. Go check out the video. It's really weird. It was creepy. And then the one area we went to, remember the hog had a bad smell, but that one area we went to made me want to throw up.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
it
it
was
was
gross.
disgusting, like the smell. And that's not sewer water. People were saying, oh, well, that's sewage. No, that's not. That's a creek. That's runoff from the creeks that are up top of the hill. And then that goes down into the river. So that's basically an offshoot of the river. That's not sewage, folks. Okay. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, Amy, it could be shedding or whatever, but the antler, the one antler broke and it looked like there was a wound or something, because you can't really see it on the camera, but we could. And so that was a good find, for people that noticed that, because we could see it and how good you guys could. I don't know. Anyway, A lot of weird stuff on that video, but go check it out. It's basically, I don't want to say boots on the ground because that makes me conjures up images of other assholes out there doing it, whatever. You know, and not everybody that does it. There's friends of ours that do it, that really do it. But then there's some stupid fake people that go around throwing rocks and saying it's Bigfoot. So they're full of shit, you know. Anyways, folks, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you later. Good night.